like to welcome everyone to meeting number 31 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Health. Pursuant to the order of reference of May 26, 2020, the committee is resuming its briefing on the Canadian response to the outbreak of the coronavirus. To ensure an orderly meeting, I would like to outline a few rules to follow. Interpretation in this video conference will work very much like in a regular committee meeting. You have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either Floor, English, or French. As you are speaking, if you plan to alternate from one language to the other, you will need also to switch the interpretation channel so that it aligns with the language you're speaking. You may want to allow for a short pause when switching languages. Before speaking, please wait until I recognize you by name, except during questioning. The questioner will generally indicate to whom the question is directed. When you are ready to speak, you can click on the microphone icon to activate your mic. A reminder that all comments by members and witnesses should be addressed through the chair. When you're not speaking, your mic should be on mute. So I'd like now to welcome our first panel of witnesses. We have from the Canadian Centre for Vaccinology, we have Dr. Scott Halperin, Director of Microbiology and Immunology, Professor of Pediatrics at Dalhousie University. For the Canadian Generic Pharmaceutical Association, we have Mr. Jim Keon, President, and Mr. Peter Hardwick, Chief Commercial Officer and Executive Vice President, Apotex. And we have from Innovative Medicines Canada, we have Ms. Pamela Freilich, President, and Mr. Dion Niam, County Medical Lead, Sanofi Canada. So with that, we will now go to witness statements. Each group will have up to 10 minutes to make a statement. We will start with the Canadian Centre for Vaccinology. Please go ahead, Dr. Halperin. 10 minutes, please.
Good morning. Thank you for the invitation to meet with your committee and provide my thoughts about Canada's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. I'm speaking to you as an individual, not formally representing any particular group. I'll spend most of my time describing the research group and research networks that I lead, since my message to you is reasonably short, and the details of my research activities will provide you with greater context for the questions that you may have for me. I'm a professor of pediatrics and microbiology and immunology at Dalhousie University and a pediatric infectious disease specialist at the Isaac Walton Killam Health Centre in Halifax, Nova Scotia. I've been in Halifax for 35 years after growing up and undertaking all of my training in the United States. I spend approximately 25% of my professional time doing clinical work, 25% in teaching and administrative work, and the remaining 50% dedicated to vaccine-related research. My declarations are that I'm a researcher and I receive research funds from multiple sources, including federal and provincial funding agencies, foundations, and from vaccine manufacturers. I also serve on federal and provincial government advisory bodies and ad hoc industry advisory panels. One such federal committee currently is the Canadian Immunity Task Force. As part of my 50% research time commitment, I'm the director of the Canadian Centre for Vaccinology, or CCFV for short. CCFV is a research collaboration of investigators at Dalhousie University, the IWK, and the Nova Scotia Health Authority. While primarily based in Halifax, CCFV also has investigators from St. Francis Xavier University and other Atlantic academic centers. CCFV is organized into three groups. The Discovery Group comprises basic scientists, including virologists, bacteriologists, and immunologists, with the goal of creating new and improved vaccines, new adjuvants, new vaccine delivery systems, and understanding the immune response to infectious disease pathogens. The Discovery Group is actively involved in COVID-19 vaccine development, establishing the animal model for COVID-19 infection, and evaluating biomarkers of COVID-19 disease. The Evaluation Group is made up of clinician scientists, epidemiologists, and statisticians who do epidemiologic studies as one of the primary vaccine trial sites in Canada. Our group is busy preparing for multiple phase 1 COVID-19 studies. The Policy, Programs, and Implementation Group is our most diverse group, comprising nursing researchers, pharmacists, health economists, bioethicists, experts in health law, anthropology, psychology, pediatrics, internal medicine, and public health. This group endeavors to understand how and when vaccines are used, to understand attitudes amongst the public and provider, and to evaluate the effectiveness of public health policy and programs. The PPI group has CIHR SSHRC funding to explore the effects of public health COVID-19 policy on various communities in Canada overseas. As part of my research program, I'm the nominated principal or co-principal investigator for 2 national networks relevant to vaccine research. The designation nominated PI is a term that designates the person responsible for administering the network in a fiscally responsible manner and meeting the funder's objectives. It does not imply that the person is the one doing most of the research, which in fact gets done by my co-PIs and co-investigators. IMPACT, the Immunization Monitoring Program, is a Public Health Agency of Canada funded surveillance network administered by the Canadian Pediatric Society at 12 of the country's pediatric hospitals, accounting for 90% of the tertiary care pediatric beds in Canada. IMPACT has been in existence for 30 years and undertakes surveillance for selected vaccine-preventable or soon-to-be vaccine-preventable diseases and adverse events following immunization severe enough to require hospitalization. The second network is the Canadian Immunization Research Network, called CERN. CERN was originally established in 2009 as the PHAC-CIHR Influenza Research Network, or PCERN, to build Canadian research capacity in anticipation of a predicted influenza pandemic, which happened to be declared within 1 week of receiving funding. PCERN was granted $3.5 million a year for 3 years, which was increased to $4.5 million a year when the pandemic was declared. PCERN was highly successful, undertaking rapid clinical trials of candidate pandemic flu vaccines, undertaking large-scale safety surveillance during the initial vaccine rollouts, establishing the safety of vaccination in egg allergic individuals, amongst many other studies. PCERN was so successful that it was decided at the time of its renewal to expand its mandate from just influenza to all vaccines of public health interest, changing its name from the Influenza Research Network to the Immunization Research Network, and cutting its budget in half from $4.5 million a year to $2.2 million a year. So here's my first message. While I'm very appreciative of the substantial research support for PCERN and continuing research support for CERN, pandemics and emerging infectious diseases are not solved. They are mitigated and will continue to occur. Over the last 11 years globally, the WHO has declared public health emergencies of international concern for H1N1 influenza, polio, Zika, Ebola twice, and now SARS-CoV-2. Cutting back on public health readiness between crises slows the response to the next emerging disease. While paying for readiness may seem wasteful and an easy target when cost cutting is occurring, eventually a price has to be paid. Once the COVID-19 pandemic passes, and it will pass, we should not drop our guard in regard to pandemic research capability. So what is CERN doing now in the current COVID-19 pandemic? CERN is organized as a network comprised of 8 sub-networks. These networks span the country. Over 100 investigators, over 30 institutions are members of CERN. The CERN networks are either actively engaged in the COVID-19 research response or poised to participate once vaccine candidates are identified. The Serious Outcomes Surveillance Network of adult acute care hospitals has already received supplemental funding to undertake COVID-19 surveillance at adult hospitals and collect specimens to understand how people and immunity and biomarkers that might predict patients who develop severe disease. CERN's Clinical Trials Network, which performed phase 1 and 2 studies on Canada's Ebola vaccine 5 years ago, is currently designing phase 1-2 studies for candidate COVID-19 vaccines. Over 10 groups have approached CERN to undertake phase 1 studies for them, and 5 are in the active planning stage. Canvas, the Vaccine Safety Network, is prepared to undertake broad surveillance to detect any vaccine-associated adverse events during the early phases of vaccine rollout. CERN's Social Science and Humanities Network will examine the public's response to novel vaccines developed to prevent COVID-19. CERN's other networks, including the Reference Laboratory Network, the Modeling Network, the Special Immunization Clinic Network, and the Provincial Collaborative Network, will also be heavily engaged as vaccines become available. So what's going well with Canada's COVID-19 public health and research response? I'm very pleased with Canada's aggressive research response to this pandemic, with rapid calls for proposals and awarding of research funds. The Tri-Council competitions have been well publicized and well managed, and the amount of funding has been substantial. Could it be more? Sure. Given that virtually all research, except for COVID-19 related research, was brought to a halt in Canada because of the public health restrictions in the workplace, including universities, this means that all of Canada's research talent turned to focus on COVID-19. So despite increased levels of funding, the success rate of grants at the granting councils did not rise, the scores required to be successful did not fall, and the research that received very high peer reviews still did not get funded. So message 2, Canada has a lot of talent. If everyone focuses on a single topic, it takes a lot of money, even more than the oppressive amount already committed, to fund all the projects that are worthwhile. My next point is a bit beyond my scientific expertise and more of a personal observation. A key aspect of Canada's successful public health and research response to the pandemic is that it has not become politicized. Canada to date has maintained the commitment to let best scientific evidence guide its public health policy and research priorities. I think this is a critical factor in the control over the pandemic that we have achieved to date and our best effort to maintain control while awaiting a vaccine solution. To close, while I don't think there's anything that has gone poorly in Canada's response, I do think there might be room for improvement. In the vaccine research and development arena, the process underway may have been more effective if there were a single person tasked to coordinate all of the activities required to bring a new vaccine into general use. While all necessary activities are underway, some have been delayed and information has not always been readily available when needed. There has been no single source for all information or a directory to point someone in the right direction for answers about what are the required next steps. This leads to processes at times being established after actors in the field already had to make critical decisions, leading to false starts and wasted time and effort. A central clearinghouse established early in the pandemic in anticipation of vaccine development might have smoothed the process and made it more transparent to all involved parties. However, this is a criticism or suggestion regarding logistics in an otherwise very effective response to the COVID-19 crisis. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Halperin. We go now to the Canadian Generic Pharmaceutical Association. I believe it's Mr. Hardwick who will speak. 10 minutes, please. Go ahead.
Thank you. Good morning. Hopefully you can hear me. I would like to thank the chair and honorable members for inviting the Canadian Generic Pharmaceutical Association to appear before the committee today. In addition to my elected role as chair of CGPA, I am the Chief Commercial Officer and Executive Vice President of Apotex, a Canadian-owned multinational pharmaceutical company and Canada's largest manufacturer of medicines. CGPA President Jim Keon and I are pleased to have the opportunity to share our industry's response to the COVID-19 pandemic and also highlight some of the ways in which Canada can do more to ensure a sustainable and more resilient supply of prescription medicines for Canadians moving forward. Generic pharmaceutical companies are Canada's primary medicine manufacturers and exporters. CGPA member companies operate the largest life sciences companies and pharmaceutical manufacturing facilities in Ontario and Quebec. The industry directly employs more than 11,000 Canadians in highly skilled research, development, and manufacturing positions. In addition to producing medicines for the Canadian market, made in Canada generic medicines are exported to more than 100 countries around the globe. Our industry also plays a significant role in supporting Canada's healthcare system. Generic medicines are dispensed to fill 73% of all prescriptions in Canada, but account for 19% of the $31 billion spent annually on prescription drugs. Up to 10 generic prescriptions can be filled for the cost of one brand name prescription today. From the outset of the pandemic, CGPA member companies have worked to provide support for our frontline workers. This has included donations of personal protective equipment, hand sanitizers, as well as financial support for hospitals. The industry has also provided support for potential COVID-19 treatments that are generic medicines. This has included two primary areas of focus. First, our industry has worked to secure a supply of generic medicines for these products to meet existing patient needs to ensure continuity of their care. Second, our industry has donated tens of millions of tablets for use in Canadian and international clinical trials and has expressed a willingness to retool our facilities and ramp up production for such products if they are found to be effective COVID treatments. Our industry has also worked with governments, public health authorities, hospitals, and international partners to help develop lists of essential drugs that are needed now and those that are needed for stockpiling in the event of subsequent pandemic waves. But perhaps the most significant contribution by the generic industry to Canada's COVID-19 response has been to provide Canadians with the medicines they need every day and to work to meet the new demands for hospital and other products required to treat patients with COVID-19. The pandemic has created unprecedented challenges and uncertainty for global supply chains in all industries, with border closures and export restrictions imposed by some countries and significant reductions in global shipping capacity. The pharmaceutical industry was not immune to these challenges. Consider for a moment the sheer number of medicines we are dealing with. Generic pharmaceutical companies supply the Canadian market with hundreds of different medicines in thousands of different dosage forms. These products are used to fill 3 out of every 4 prescriptions. While many of these prescriptions are made in Canada, the industry is fully globalized. Finished products, manufacturing inputs, and active pharmaceutical ingredients are also sourced internationally. The CGPA is extremely proud of the dedication and hard work of generic industry employees to keep medicines in production in our manufacturing facilities and to keep medicines moving through the supply chain. They continue to provide an essential service for Canadians every single day, as well as the work of several provinces, distributors, and pharmacists to help us ensure equitable access to the supply of medicines in a time of global supply chain upheaval. The movement of all products internationally, including medicines, is much slower and more difficult than it used to be and is much more costly. While the situation has stabilized considerably, our industry is monitoring developments around the world on an ongoing basis to identify potential supply chain risk. I will now turn the floor over to Jim Keon to provide our industry's recommendations from the lessons learned from COVID-19. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. I know the clerk has circulated to members a summary of the CGPA blueprint for a sustainable supply of prescription medicines for Canadians. The CGPA developed this blueprint based on some of the lessons learned during the first 3 months of the pandemic. It outlines our recommendations to make the prescription drug supply chain even stronger and more secure for Canadians. The COVID-19 pandemic has served as a wake-up call for governments, healthcare professionals, and the broader public on the importance of having a robust and resilient domestic pharmaceutical industry. In a recent interview with CBC Radio's The House, Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland noted that one of the consequences of coronavirus is going to mean for the economy a shift from a sort of just-in-time, get the very cheapest input possible model to a model that puts a greater emphasis on resilience, puts a greater emphasis on supply chains that are closer to home. Putting a greater emphasis on resilience in the pharmaceutical supply chain will mean challenging the status quo and adopting new policy approaches. And that is precisely what the CGPA is recommending. The CGPA identifies specific measures to enhance Canada's existing pharmaceutical manufacturing capacity and domestic capabilities, to create a more resilient pharmaceutical supply chain with increased supply redundancy, to ensure Canada's role within a well-functioning global supply chain, and to encourage the establishment of a more coordinated approach to equipping Canada for future health emergencies. I'm going to turn to our first area, strengthening the domestic pharmaceutical industry. Investments are needed to support Canada's pharmaceutical infrastructure. Companies will need assistance in preserving, refocusing, and expanding domestic manufacturing infrastructure and increasing other infrastructure capacity such as warehousing. Companies may also require additional support to address the significant financial burden associated with maintaining higher stock levels of key manufacturing inputs and medicines. A second aspect of strengthening the industry, increased regulatory convergence, both nationally and internationally. The reality is that Canada is a costly and complex jurisdiction for generic manufacturers to operate in, and removing unnecessary regulatory hurdles should be a priority. Third area, third aspect of this is pricing levels. The how low can you go pricing does not build resilience. A review of Canada's current pricing regime is needed to ensure that it is economically feasible to manufacture medicines in Canada and to be sufficiently competitive to acquire finished products and other inputs on the international market. Fourth aspect of strengthening the market, strengthening the domestic industry. If the percentage of generic drugs used in Canada matched the current levels of use in the United States, Canada would save more than $11 billion annually. Fifth area, we are arguing for a sustainable domestic market for biosimilars to be implemented. This would involve maximizing the use of biosimilar medicines through broad implementation of well-controlled switching policies by public and private drug plans in Canada, including federal plans. A second key area of our focus of the blueprint is securing and enhancing Canada's role in the international pharmaceutical supply chain. This could include, for example, the development of an international pharmaceutical supply chain security agreement, something we have recommended. The third and final key area of focus in the CGPA blueprint is identifying essential generic medicines to domestically produce and stockpile for Canadian needs. A coordinated approach is needed between federal, provincial, and territorial governments to establish a list of high priority medicines. Building a domestic stockpile of these products will also require guaranteed volume and price agreements with companies. The CGPA and its member companies look forward to working with Canadian governments and other stakeholders to turn the objective of a sustainable supply of prescription medicines for Canadians into a reality. Peter and I would be pleased to answer any questions you may have this morning. Thank you.
Thank you. We go now to Innovative Medicines Canada. Ms. Freilich, please go ahead, 10 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Honorable members, thank you very much for the opportunity to meet with you today. I'd like to start by acknowledging the efforts of the entire federal government to fight the spread of COVID-19 and to protect our economy. As a Canadian, I'm proud of how our government has risen to the challenge. I've spent most of my working life in the healthcare sector. I can honestly say that the degree of cooperation we are seeing across governments, our health systems, industry, and civil society is something I've never experienced, and Canadians will be better off for it. Pardon me. I'm here today on behalf of Innovative Medicines Canada. IMC represents not just 40 companies from the innovative medicines and the life sciences sectors, but also the tens of thousands of Canadians who work for them. Day in and day out, they do dedicate themselves to ensuring all Canadians have the medicines they need when they need them. I'm joined today by one of them, which is Dr. Dion Neem. Dr. Neem is a country medical lead for Sanofi Canada and country medical head for Pasteur, the vaccine arm of Sanofi. He's also a pediatrician working in urgent care clinics. He's here not as a company representative, but as an expert in the field of vaccines who can answer any questions you might have about some of the COVID-19 related developments taking place in Canada and around the world. I mentioned that our membership consists of 40 companies. Together, they contribute $19 billion annually in economic activity and support 30,000 high-value jobs across the Canadian economy. They also invest 10% of their revenues, or $1.2 billion per year, into research and development in Canada. Currently, there are more than 500 new products, medicines, and vaccines in development in Canada, including therapies focused on some of the most devastating illnesses like cancer, as well as rare and infectious diseases. Today, though, there's no greater priority than the fight against COVID-19. Our members are collaborating like never before to accelerate the discovery and development of treatments for people infected with the virus and vaccines to stop its spread. Our members are also providing financial support and in-kind donations to organizations on the ground in Canada and around the world. They're maintaining patient support and compassionate care programs put in place by industry to help keep Canadians out of hospitals and reduce the burden on the health systems. And they're working with governments and other stakeholders to help ensure that patients, doctors, and hospitals continue to have the access to the medicines they need on a daily basis. Dr. Neem will now describe the activities our members are undertaking towards the discovery of a vaccine.
Mr. Chair, for over 100 years, through innovation, altruism, and collaboration, Canada has successfully responded to infectious disease outbreaks. From Dr. John Fitzgerald and the University of Toronto preparing a diphtheria and tetanus antitoxin, to vaccine researchers developing freeze-dried smallpox vaccine, Canada's innovation has helped save millions upon millions of lives. Today, during the COVID-19 pandemic, 15 IMC companies have opened up their libraries of molecular compounds to share with the global scientific community to spur the development of vaccines and treatments for the COVID-19 virus through the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation COVID-19 Therapeutic Accelerator. In just 2 weeks, Roche Canada received over 800 submissions from Canada's scientific community through its COVID-19 Innovation Challenge, a $900,000 funding program created to bring forward innovative ideas to address the pandemic. In Atlantic Canada, BioVectra is manufacturing critical raw materials for COVID-19 diagnostic testing kits and collaborating with multiple Canadian biopharmaceutical companies and researchers on COVID-19 therapeutic products. Quebec's Medicago is rapidly moving forward on clinical trials to assess the safety and efficacy of their candidate vaccine and scaling up production. In British Columbia, Amgen is building on 20 years of experience in the field of therapeutic antibodies and is actively engaging in anti-COVID-19 therapeutic antibody discovery efforts. In short, we are witnessing an unprecedented effort in terms of financial commitment to and accelerated pace in research and development of prophylactic and therapeutic treatments for COVID-19 while continuing to produce and supply medications for existing patients. The ingenuity, innovative, and creative collaborative spirits and commitment of our industry is a testament to our values and our sense of responsibility to our country, Canada.
Thank you, Dr. Neame. I'd like to shift to a topic that I know is on the minds of many, and that's the potential for drug shortages as a result of COVID-19. IMC's membership consists of the pharmaceutical companies that do discover, develop, they deliver innovative new medicines, that is brand name prescription medicines. Our members continue to be vigilant in identifying potential supply issues and are committed to working closely with the Canadian governments to quickly identify solutions. We support the efforts of Health Canada in this regard. In the event of any anticipated delays in supplying the Canadian market with an approved medicine to meet expected patient demand, our member companies would, in full compliance with the law, report this to Health Canada, and it would be made public on the drugshortages.ca website. If there is one area where the federal government could provide additional support, it is in the area of COVID-19 related hospital products. Specifically, there may be an enhanced role for the federal government to play in coordinating provincial requests for additional supplies of drugs to ensure that no province and no Canadian goes without the medications they need. Speaking more broadly, we recognize that reliable access to the medications depends on many factors. These include regulatory simplicity, timely approvals for new medications, and the continued smooth functioning of global supply chains. In this regard, we support Health Canada's ongoing commitment to take steps towards a simpler regulatory regime, but more needs to be done to quicken the approval of new medications. And we applaud the efforts made by the federal and some provincial governments to protect medical supply chains serving Canada. On the topic of regulations, we remain deeply concerned about the impact amendments to the patented medicines regulations will have on Canadians' access to new medications. Industry's concerns have not been adequately addressed by the recently revised guidelines. Our concerns are supported by independent studies as well as by the delayed product launches as a result of the regulations. The regulations will also hurt Canada's ability to realize the Department of Innovation and Science's HBEST strategy, or to attract investment to our life sciences sector at a time when provinces like Ontario and Quebec want to build capacity in this area. Let me assure you that IMC members are sensitive to the increasing strain on health budgets. However, since the recent federal court decision removed a key pillar of the PMPRB's approach to price regulation, that means a fundamental rethinking of PMPRB's approach is now required. We remain keen to work with the federal government on alternative solutions to the proposed changes to the patented medicines regulations that would ensure Canadians continue to have access to affordable, innovative medicines. It is not too late to find another solution to reach this objective. To return to the industry's response to COVID-19, I'd like to leave you with 3 examples of our members' contributions. First, some of our member companies are ensuring patients continued access to the treatments they need by providing their medicines free of charge if patients cannot afford them or if they lose private prescription drug coverage due to COVID-19 related unemployment. On this point, I'm able to report that based on feedback received from some of our members, there has in fact been minimal demand for free medication from patients. One of our members, for instance, reported they've seen less than 2% of anticipated demand for free medicine. Others are reporting similar experiences. This suggests to us that there are far fewer people without access to the medicines they need than expected. Second, with some provincial healthcare systems experiencing critical skills shortages, Innovative Medicines Canada member companies are stepping up to help patients and communities. Many of our members are providing paid leave to health professional employees, enabling them to volunteer in healthcare facilities where the need is greatest. And finally, my third example, IMC members have created a special COVID-19 fund. A key initiative created through this fund is the creation of a research chair in pandemic preparedness, this industry's way of helping Canada prepare for the next health crisis. Thank you again for the opportunity to talk with you about how Canada's innovative medicines and life sciences sector is responding to COVID-19. And like your other witnesses, we would be pleased to answer your questions. Thank you, merci.
Thank you all. We will now start our questioning. We will do 2 rounds of questions. We will start the first round at this point with Mr. General. Please go ahead, Mr. General, 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you all witnesses for taking the time out of the summer here to be here with us. Dr. Halpern, just a quick comment to your comments. The coordination and logistics, that's certainly something we've heard across the board in terms of the response to this pandemic. If there's any specific examples that you can provide, would certainly be helpful as of course we're looking to make sure that government's response to COVID-19, any potential other potential pandemics is better next time around. But I would like to start with perhaps Dr. Neem, if that's all right. Just with regards to some of the comments you made about the vaccine and vaccine research, we're hearing daily that there's a new research dollars put here, new research dollars put there, not just in Canada. I'm talking across the world. But how likely is Canada to be able to receive this vaccine in competition with some of the other countries like the US and China's?
Right. Thank you for the question. So many of the IMC companies are in fact global companies, and we will be working to develop vaccines. And when we develop those vaccines, it'll be based on many of the volumes that we will to understand the distribution. I think one of the most important things is that it may necessarily not be.
Pardon me, Mr. Neem, could you hold up your mic, please?
Yeah, thank you. Part of what's going to be happening is the distribution of the vaccines. Now, we have global organizations which Canada is involved in understanding how we will be distributing those vaccines. And it depends on specifically which company would produce the vaccine as well. And I can direct you to Dr. Halpern, who's doing a lot of work on research on vaccines that are going to be doing clinical trials here in Canada, and he may be able to comment to that. I can say that.
Sorry, Dr. Neem, only because I'm short on time. Is your opinion that Canada is at the table right now in terms of being able to get a vaccine when in competition with other countries like the US and China pouring lots of money into this?
Yes, I would say that, and I would actually direct maybe to Dr. Halpern at this point.
Sure, I'd love to talk to Dr. Halpern about that, but I also want to talk to Ms. Fralick with regards to some of the PMPRB comments as well, because that's obviously it's a major hurdle in a lot of getting these drugs to market. So you recently I've read a few pieces that you produced here, Pam. But would you say that the competition for global investment dollars has drastically increased since COVID-19? And prior to COVID-19, was there an increase in global investment dollars here in Canada?
Sorry, could you just repeat that question? It's investment dollars pre and post COVID-19?
Yeah, did we see an increase pre-COVID-19? Have we seen an increase since?
Yeah, I don't have data to speak to specifically that demarcation. I can certainly say that we are struggling to attract global investment in the pharmaceutical world and life sciences to Canada over the last couple of years, and that continues. But that is related to the uncertainty, and now frankly, the devastating implications of the Patent and Medicine Prices Review Board changes that have been made, the regulatory changes.
Yeah, and just to highlight some of your comments, I believe it was in the Globe and Mail, you said companies are not going to bring their latest, greatest, newest, innovative drugs into a clinical trial in Canada if they have a good sense that the drug is not going to be available in Canada after the trial.
Mm-hmm.
This means that patients, you and I, our families, friends, colleagues, are not necessarily going to have the drugs we need and should have. That was in June 18th. Has anything changed in your opinion since then?
No, not in our opinion. It hasn't. Our concerns remain the same. Our biggest driver in this industry is making sure that Canadians, that patients have access to the medicines they need. It sounds like a cliche, but there is no business without that outcome. And what we are seeing is the uncertainty and the lack of balance between cost containment initiatives and a drive for investment in this country that is affecting the global desire to invest in this country. And so the companies are very, very aware again of sustainability issues in health systems, but they need a viable business model to bring their products into this country. So they're quite and increasingly reluctant to bring new innovative products for clinical trials. As example, we've seen an up to 50% reduction in clinical trials since the regulations were brought in, because ethically they understand that these drugs may not be available to those Canadians, given the regulations that will, at this point in time, come into play on the 1st of January.
And ultimately, it's the patients who suffer at the end of the day, in your opinion.
It's all about the patients. As you say, there is no industry without patients, and there is no industry without good outcomes for these patients. So that is the driver, yes.
So we heard that recently the PMPRB changes have been pushed back now to January. Have you heard any sense that that's going to make a difference in terms of, I believe one of your comments that fortunately it's not too late to find a solution that will avert the outcome. Industry's prepared to come forward. We hope the government will be a willing partner. Have you had any sense that things are going to change?
I remain an internal optimist. I would like to think that this slight delay will give us the opportunity to open that door. The industry has, for the last 2 years, been very open to working with government to find the best policy solutions possible. We have brought ideas and efforts forward. We are a global industry, and we have many examples of where there is a very strong and collaborative relationship between industry, patients, and governments. And so we've drawn from those to produce some ideas that we think government should be considering. We are entering into further discussions over the summer to do exactly that, and we will be pushing hard for a door to be open. And let's get the best solution for Canadians, not just the one that is expedient, perhaps.
Thank you, Mr. Jenner. We go now to Mr. Kellaway. Mr. Kellaway, go ahead, please. 6 minutes.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and hello to staff and to colleagues and to witnesses. My questions will be focused on Innovative Medicines Canada. So I was about I'd say 3 months ago, maybe 4 months ago now, I'm losing track of time. I spoke with one of your team members, Bobby Sutherland, and learned that a number of your clients from startups to large companies were involved in researching COVID-19 and specifically vaccine exploration. Can you give me an idea of how many of these vaccine development projects are still underway and any hopeful candidates? So can you get us a sense of where we are with what you know at this time?
Maybe I'll jump in and answer that question. So across the world, there's about 150 different companies who have SARS-CoV-2 candidate vaccines. These are distributed into different types. mRNA vaccines and subunit vaccines seem to be the ones that people are working on. It is extremely, extremely complicated to make a vaccine because it's a biologic. Usually we're looking at 10 to 15 years, as I'm sure you well know. But now we're trying to cram that into approximately 1 to 2 years. Many of the companies have moved very quickly because they've had previous platforms for different types of viruses, whether it be Ebola or influenza virus vaccines. So those are the ones that are jumping ahead. Most likely, we will see a vaccine within the next year to 2 years. The question always is it safe and is it efficacious? And this is where we must continue to do substantial phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 trials. And then they'll be ready. If they work, they'll be ready to come to Canada. We have to understand that we are dealing with infectious diseases. Although we talk about infectious diseases and vaccines hand in hand, some infectious diseases are very amenable to vaccine production. Some are it's much more difficult. And so we're dealing with coronavirus, which sits in the middle. It's not HIV, which is very difficult for vaccine development, but it's going to be challenging.
Great, thank you for that. And as a pharmaceutical company, how has your organization benefited from the $1 billion in national medical research strategy monies that were announced earlier in this pandemic? That's for either or both.
In regard to the research funds,
yes.
My company, Sanofi, is not benefited, but other companies have. This is not about one or two different companies. Across the board, we have to try to
It's a web.
Do our best. Yeah, and Health Canada, I've been in great communication with Health Canada. They have asked myself to find small biotechs in Canada, which we can introduce to them to find the best research possibilities. It's not a guessing game here. This is a science game. We have to try to find the best opportunities and back those best opportunities with funds. And I think we've done a really good job here in Canada. But once again, it's just going to be hard. When you look at the therapeutics, I'm jumping away from vaccines for a second, but when
Sure.
you look at therapeutics that we've been looking at in regard to clinical trials, there's been a lot of indications that some of our already licensed products may have effects with COVID-19. And we've gone through it, and we've gone through many trials, lots of money. Unfortunately, right now, with all that we've done, we're not really seeing many candidates that are actually going to be helping us. And that's just the nature of the business. We have to innovate, we have to invest, we have to study, and then we're hoping that we will find some help from therapeutics and vaccines.
If I might add one
Please.
quick comment, and I think that it's almost a good news story that I can't give you a list of every company and how many dollars they received and benefited, because what it means, and it's to Dr. Neem's point, is that everyone is working in collaboration. I can point to a company of ours in Quebec, Medicago, we mentioned in the opening comments, who identified a candidate vaccine in 20 days from the virus first coming or being identified here in Canada. In British Columbia, we have Eli Lilly, one of our member companies, working with AbCellera and having taken advantage of a great deal of funding to work on the antibody side of this particular situation. So we could go on a list of where our companies have benefited. Our website actually keeps a daily and weekly update of all of the projects underway, if you'd like to have a look at those. We're just very grateful that the government has really acknowledged the important role that the life sciences plays at this particular time and has put their money behind that.
It's fantastic to see that collaboration, and obviously important and needed. I'm wondering if we can go back to a couple of comments that were made just previously. And I'm about, when I'm asking questions to witnesses, I'm about, kind of doing a deeper dive on some of the questions. And I'm really curious from your perspective, and I think you touched upon it a little bit, but what influences companies to invest in research in Canada? Like, what would be the top three that you would be looking at? And, based on that, would your companies, your web of companies, your network of companies consider manufacturing or further research investments here in Canada? So I guess the first question is, what influences companies to research and do research and invest in Canada?
Let me say, first of all, that Canada is seen as a very attractive country. So companies want to invest here. We have a good healthcare system. We have excellent researchers. We have good institutions. We have diverse populations for clinical trials. So we are an attractive place. The CEOs of our member companies spend a lot of their time competing, if you will, and making sure, trying to bring investment dollars into this country. And we can show you studies done by Ernst Young that have evidence that 10% of the revenue does go into R&D in this country. That being said, we could do so much more. And I think COVID-19, I hate to look at it as an opportunity for anything, but it is a chance to recalibrate how we're doing business in this country. we do need a very supportive regulatory environment. We are out of balance right now. And I don't want to harp on that issue. I will if given the opportunity, but we need to balance that out. We need to address a system that has been constructed in pieces and is very slow to bring products to market. So it will take Canada over 900 days to bring an innovative product from initial approval into patients' hands. The OECD median is down around 500 days, and I can cite many countries that are in the 300-day range. So we are out of step. To the government's credit, and Health Canada is working on changing this, but we are very far behind. So having that faster time to list. So those are a couple of the key issues. There are others I could cite, but in the interest of time, perhaps those are the two most important.
Thank you, Mr. Kellaway.
Thank you.
I did have one comment, if I may.
Monsieur, désolé, allez-y. 6 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
6 minutes. Yes, thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to all our witnesses.
My first question is for Mr. Neem. You said that about 150 candidate vaccines were available around the world, if I understand correctly. According to your own opinion on this, and let's be objective on the matter, what are the most promising vaccines out of these vaccines that are currently being worked on around the world? And what is the difference between these vaccines, please?
Promising is it's an interesting word. So it's almost like what is coming first. And so we have a number of vaccines that are coming first. There's one particularly out of Oxford, which is associated with AstraZeneca. It is a vector form of vaccine with an mRNA on the adenovirus. Now, once again, that's wonderful. It's a candidate vaccine. It seems in theory and science that it would work, but we have to do clinical trials. So to get to the finish line first doesn't mean that you're actually going to, in regard to a candidate, doesn't mean it's actually going to be safe and doesn't mean it's going to be effective. We have another vaccine candidate coming called from CanSino, and again, Dr. Halpern can speak to that. This is a vaccine that is in place right now. It is, Dr. Halpern will do clinical trials, phase 3s fairly soon in the Halifax area. We have Sanofi with its collaboration with GlaxoSmithKline. They are using a influenza manufacturing system called the baculovirus and baculovirus expression system. Because that has created flu vaccines in the past, we feel confident that we can create COVID proteins with an adjuvant from GSK, and that will come fairly soon. But once again, we have to do clinical trials to make sure it's safe and efficacious. There's a number of different vaccines which are called mRNA or RNA vaccines. Moderna, you might have heard of that company. That is moving along quite quickly there into their trials as well. Once again, hate to keep repeating myself, but it has to be safe and it has to be efficacious.
Très intéressant.
Very interesting. Now, when we get to the finish line, say in fall, we can expect 1 or 2 vaccines to have gone through these 3 stages, and they'll be commercial. What's going to make the difference between 2 vaccines that have gone through all these stages? You talked about efficacy. Could we, say, accept a vaccine that is 60% efficient and another one that's 80% efficient? And also, could you talk about the prices? With the competition that's going on and with the Chinese market and our friends and enemies around the world, could you talk about that, please?
So I don't think there's going to be a single vaccine that's going to be the solution. And a lot of that has to do with production capacity. So we will have, hopefully, many successful, safe, and efficacious vaccines, and then we will see the manufacturing ability, the production ability. I understand from our colleagues in Swiftwater, Pennsylvania, that we may be producing 600 million doses if our COVID-19 candidate vaccine is successful, but you can see 600 million is not going to take care, and that's per year, 8 billion people. So multiple vaccines will come into play. It will certainly not be, you know, a pharmaceutical company who's going to define, you know, how much they can and where it's going to go. I think that will be much more based on the governments in regard to previous agreements they may have had with pharmaceutical companies. There's also organizations which are looking at the ethical distribution of COVID-19 vaccines, and they will be involved. I don't know, Pamela, if you have any other comments on that.
Yeah, just to emphasize the policy making, the policy decisions that are going to be required by every government to determine who gets these vaccines first. And there's a lot of coverage in the media these days about that very question. First of all, once we get the vaccine, and I say once because I'm confident we will, creating the supplies and then the distribution. But every country will likely take a different approach to that.
Et peut-être une autre petite question.
Another additional question which you might be able to answer, Mrs. Froelich, when it comes to efficiency, price, and safety, what are other factors that might actually help a government make a decision?
My colleagues, Dr. Halpern and Neem, might be the best to respond to that. As I say, there's quite a bit of coverage in the press right now in terms of making that decision. Do you provide it to the most vulnerable, the elderly we see, the marginalized populations, or do we identify the biggest spreaders, young people, et cetera, who are perhaps asymptomatic but spreading the disease? Do we give it to frontline health professionals? These are big questions for policy decision makers. Doctors Halpern or Neem, you may want to jump in on this one.
Well, I think the epidemiology has been fairly clear on this in regard to who are the most vulnerable. And those certainly are people that are the most frail in our community. And it's quite horrible. When you look at Canada and the statistics for Canada, initially, when you were looking at the morbidity and mortality rates, particularly, that was almost 85% of people that were from the long-term care and from seniors' homes. Now, because they're the most vulnerable, they tended to, unfortunately, pass quite quickly. And you'll see that the numbers have gone down now to about 65%. But then when you look at the reason that it's dropped from 85 to 65, you're seeing it's people who may be living outside of a long-term care or a seniors retirement home, but they are also people who may have multiple comorbidities and tend to be above 65 years of age. So the epidemiology for me is fairly clear. Dr. Halpern, would you like to comment?
J'ai encore quelques minutes, Monsieur le Président.
Do I still have a few minutes left, Mr. Chair?
However, I'll
Merci
let
tout le monde.
the witness quickly respond.
Yeah, the other thing will be that there is a process that is taking place by the National Advisory Committee on Immunization, which will be recommending how the vaccines, when they are available, should be used and how they should be rolled out and who should be priorities. And those recommendations will be federal recommendations made to the provinces, and then each province will then interpret those based on their own population, and so vaccine would be rolled out based on that prioritization. That's very similar to what was done with the H1N1 pandemic. A process was taken place, and it takes into account the bioethics, the epidemiology, the effectiveness of the vaccine in different populations, et cetera. So there will be a process.
Thank you, Mr. Desilets. We go now to Mr. Davies. Mr. Davies, please go ahead, 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for being with us today. Mr. Keon, you were quoted recently as saying the following with respect to provisions of the COVID-19 Emergency Response Act, which provides the federal government or anyone it designates with the authority to make, sell, or use patented inventions to the extent necessary to respond to a public health emergency. Quote, the ability of a country to issue compulsory licenses for medicines and other urgently needed items to respond to a health crisis is not a novel approach and is embedded in international trade agreements, such as the WTO Agreement on Trade-Related Aspects of Intellectual Property Rights. This is a prudent and reasonably precautionary measure, end quote. Given that this authority in the legislation is set to expire on September 30th, do you believe that Parliament should extend it? I'm waiting for Mr. Keon.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, we made that comment. The government moved with emergency measures in March when the COVID shock first hit. I think while we support that legislation, that is, to be very honest, has not been our focus. Our focus has been on the 75% of the medicines that we are now producing and that we are able to continue to manufacture and provide those medicines to Canadians. When a vaccine is developed, we will see what the situation is. But our focus, as I said right now, is on ensuring that those 3 out of 4 medicines that we now produce and provide the billions in savings to the healthcare system are protected and that we have greater access to them going forward.
Okay, well, before I leave that area, I'm curious about your comment on one aspect of this. Remdesivir, which is the first drug approved by licensing authorities in the US to treat COVID-19, is made by Gilead, and that's been shown to help people recover faster from the disease. The first 140,000 doses supplied to drug trials around the world have been used up, and we now see the Trump administration has now bought more than 500,000 doses, which is all of Gilead's production for July, and 90% of August and September. So in your view, should Canada issue compulsory licenses in order to secure a sufficient domestic supply of COVID-19 treatments like Remdesivir?
Well, I won't speak for Gilead because they're not a member of our group, but in general, the trials on Remdesivir are ongoing. It appears that it has some effect in reducing the morbidity of COVID-19, so that's excellent. I think when again the approvals are forthcoming that it is an effective treatment, we'll see whether Gilead is making the product available by licensing. I think it already has around the world licensed the product, in particular in developing countries, and I think in Europe and Canada and the US that we'll see how that evolves and whether there's an issue there. But right now, my understanding is that the product is available in Canada for use.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Halperin, if you do know this, what stage are you at in terms of studying the safety and or effectiveness of the CanSino Biologics vaccine candidate?
So the phase 1/2 trial of the CanSino vaccine in Canada has not started yet. It's imminently going to start, just finishing the final approvals that are required to have the vaccine shipped to Canada. And then once that happens, we'll be starting the trials here. As you're aware, that vaccine has undergone phase 1 and now phase 2 studies in China. The studies designed for Canada are a little bit different to expand the information about the vaccine.
So staying with that, Dr. Halperin, in a May 19th, 2020 news release from Dalhousie University, you noted the intellectual property rights for that vaccine will, quote, stay in Chinese hands, end quote, but the National Research Council's involvement would help ensure Canada gets its guaranteed domestic supply. Precisely what conditions are in place to ensure Canada receives a sufficient domestic supply of the vaccine if it proves to be successful?
From my understanding of the agreement, and again, that's an agreement between the National Research Council and CanSino, that the National Research Council is being provided with the seed stock of the vaccine and will be able to manufacture it in Canadian facilities, not for sale, but for utilization in Canada. So once the Canadian manufacturing capability is up and running, it's by that method that Canada's supply will be assured, because we'll have the manufacturing capacity here in Canada.
Thank you. Back to you, Mr. Keon. I understand that the generic industry has a different take, I think it'd be fair to say, on the amount of research that is being done by pharmaceutical companies in Canada, and whether or not they in fact have met their 10% commitment that they made back in the 1980s as a condition of receiving extended intellectual property protection. What's your association's view on that?
Well, we've been clear. The commitment on intellectual property has not been reached in many years now. And I think that's a matter for IMC to address with the government. We have particularly raised this point when there have been discussions in international trade agreements where countries like the United States or the European Commission has pressured Canada to increase intellectual property protection. And we have pointed out that in the past, when Canada made agreements around certain levels of research and development in return for greater intellectual property protection, it didn't work out. So we continue to say that trade agreements, intellectual property protection in Canada needs to be addressed from a Canadian perspective. You need to look at the amount of research and development, the jobs, and the healthcare savings available. Every year that a patent or intellectual property is extended means that the generics, which are priced at, in some cases, at a 90% discount, will not be available, and that's a very high price to pay in the healthcare system.
Ms. Freilich, I'll direct my final question to you. Now, the Government of Canada estimates that proposed reforms to Canada's drug pricing regulations, you referred to them as the PMPRB proposals, will save Canadians $13.2 billion over 10 years on patented drug costs. They say the new rules will save money for patients, employers, and insurers at the expense of drug industry profits. In response, Innovative Medicines Canada has argued that these regulatory changes will result in fewer clinical trials and new medicines being available for sale. However, Doug Clark, Executive Director of the Patented Medicine Prices Review Board, has stated publicly that there is virtually zero correlation between prices and drugs coming to market, R&D spending, and clinical trial intensity in any country that the PMPRB has looked at. How do you respond to Mr. Clark's position?
Thank you very much for the opportunity to respond to that. And I also have something to add to your previous question to Mr. Keon, if there is time. We looked at Health Canada data. So it isn't our data, but Health Canada data, and compared the data from Q4 2019. So the regulations were passed on August 21st, 2019. We looked at Q4, how many new drugs were brought to Canada versus the previous 3 years. And there is a, depending on the year, about a 50% decrease on drugs being brought to Canada. So I noted that Mr. Clark says that perhaps we don't have all the data, but if we don't, then I hope that that he would share that with us. Using similarly Health Canada data, we've noticed that clinical trials have dropped between 38 and 40, 50, 47% in that same quarter. So the evidence is very clear to us. There's also, and I'm reaching for a document here because I don't have the numbers committed to memory, but very recently a literature review of about 49 papers that looked at this link between pricing and drug launches was released, and it shows clearly that 44 out of these 49 papers that were reviewed found a negative relationship between drug price controls, or a significant positive relationship between drug price levels. So bottom line, again, there's more details on this. I know we don't have time for it. I'm happy to share the information with you. But there is absolutely no question in our mind that there's a very clear link between pricing and drug launches, as well as investment, and obviously at the end of the day, access to medicines. If I might just make one other comment vis-a-vis your question around investment, because that really was more about our members and the commitment with PMPRB to invest 10% of our revenues. The definition that was reflected in the PMPRB agreement was a very particular program, SR&ED, SR&ED, which you're probably familiar with, the tax credit program. And at that time, the industry did commit to 10%, and for many years, it increased its investment in that program. The problem is that the industry has changed. The world has changed in 30 years. And so while it is accurate that the industry only contributes now about 5% rather than 10% in SR&ED, it does commit at least 10% of its revenue to R&D in this country. One example, and we've been talking about this throughout the morning, clinical trials are a critical piece of the research process. At any given time, there are about 4,500 going on in Canada. They are funded by this industry. Health Canada does not consider that research. Many of you will be familiar with MARS down in Toronto, and JLabs, which is an incubator for new research. Millions of dollars poured into that annually. That is not included. And so the Government of Canada has recognized that the definition of research and development does need to be modernized. And so ISED and StatsCan have a project with the industry where we've redefined what R&D does mean, and the data are being calculated as we speak. Ernst Young did do a study a couple of years ago now. That's why we've come up with the 10%. It's actually 9.97% of revenue. So the industry is a very strong contributor to R&D in Canada, would like to do more if circumstances and the situation were more amenable to that. Sorry for going on at length, but I felt you deserved an answer to both questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Davies. Your 10 minutes is up. We will go now to Ms. Jansen. We'll start the second round with Ms. Jansen. We will, Ms. Jansen, 5 minutes, please.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to direct my calls to Dr. Halpern. Does my sound all right? Sorry, it sounds in my headphones that I have a problem. Is there any problem?
I can hear you fine.
Okay, so I'll begin then. Dr. Halpern, how much money has your research center received from the federal government for work on vaccines with CanSino Biologics?
So at this stage, we have an agreement. We're not receiving any funds from CanSino. The funds are from the Canadian government, from the National Research Council.
And how much is that?
I am not sure of the exact amount. It's in the range of approximately, I believe it's about $800,000 that will come in. We haven't received any funds as of yet, but the agreement is done. The funds will come in once the study starts.
Okay, so isn't it true that the vaccine you're working on with CanSino uses a very similar platform technology, specifically the modified adenovirus vector, expressing the virus as S protein, to another vaccine that's already been worked on at Oxford University?
It's a different vaccine. So the Oxford vaccine uses the chimpanzee adenovirus. And that, as Dr. Neem mentioned, that's expressing not expressing the protein, but it's expressing the genetic material that then produces that protein. The CanSino is an adenovirus 5, which is a human adenovirus strain, and it expresses the spike protein.
So, but it's more alike than it's different, correct?
Similar platform, as there are about 5 or 6 different platforms, and this is one platform which is having another organism, a non-pathogenic organism, express the proteins of SARS-CoV-2. So
I guess the question kind of leads to the idea of, if the Oxford University vaccine is already in final phases of clinical trials, so phase 3, and one of the world's leading pharmaceutical firms, which was mentioned already, AstraZeneca, is already manufacturing hundreds of millions of doses to be ready by the end of the year, where in comparison, according to clinicaltrials.gov, your trial at Dalhousie is not even yet recruiting patients for phase 2 trials. And the company that you're partnered with, CanSino, hasn't even sold a single product outside of China. With respect then, how is it possible that Dalhousie and CanSino will be able to outrace Oxford and AstraZeneca to a vaccine?
I think the race is for successful vaccines, not a vaccine. I think, as Dr. Neem mentioned, what we need are vaccines, and that we need multiple vaccines. And it's not just because of manufacturing capability, but that is clearly one. We need multiple companies with multiple facilities in order to produce vaccines that are going to have a global demand. But also, different vaccines and different platforms maybe turn out to be more effective in different subpopulations. So, for example, there may be vaccines that work better in the elderly, others that work better in young, healthy adults, others that work better in children. So what we need are multiple vaccines. So I think any vaccine that's successful.
I understand. It's kind of like having more than one iron in the fire. I do get that. Last week, we learned that CanSino is skipping the phase 3 trial. Its vaccine is going to be injected into Chinese soldiers. And not only would that never happen in Canada, but soldiers cannot insist on informed consent. So that's obviously against the rules of medical ethics. And so have you told the government that you would refuse to work with such a partner that's violating those medical ethics? And if not, why not?
CanSino is not going to be avoiding phase 3 trials. CanSino is currently, along with working with the WHO and other country partners, are planning phase 3 studies, which are going to take place in various countries around the world. So as with all manufacturers, they will be undertaking phase 3 studies. My understanding is that the Chinese government has decided to use that vaccine in, and again, this is just from the news, not from CanSino, in Chinese soldiers, under what would in Canada be called an emergency authorization. And in Canada, we may also use an emergency authorization down the line with one of the vaccines that's successful. What that means is to be able to use the vaccine in large scale prior to having full phase 3 information and full market authorization.
So is that sort of like throwing out the medical ethics just due to the urgency? Is that kind of what we're thinking?
No, that's not at all what we're thinking. What we'd be doing would be exactly what was done with Canada's Ebola vaccine, where phase 1 and 2 studies were done, and then phase 3 studies and emergency authorization were used, which stopped the epidemic in West Africa. In fact, that vaccine, which was being developed ultimately was being developed by Merck, only received licensure, full market authorization about a year and a half ago, 4 years after it stopped the epidemic in West Africa. So emergency authorization is one of the tools that Health Canada has as well, and maybe something that in a promising vaccine, no matter who is the manufacturer, may be used. And that's done in a perfectly ethical manner.
Thank you, Ms. Jansen. And Ms. Jansen, you might want to unplug and plug in your mic again. The clerk has advised that there's a problem. We'll go now to Mr. Van Bynen. Mr. Van Bynen, please go ahead, 5 minutes.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you also to the witnesses who are making themselves available for this important research. My first question is for Dr. Halperin. Around the globe, people are hungry for a vaccine to put an end to the COVID-19 pandemic, but we also have an anti-vaccine movement that seems to keep growing even during a pandemic. In your professional opinion, could anti-vaxxer movement undermine the efforts to end the COVID-19 pandemic? And to people wondering whether or not they should take the virus once ready, what challenges may an anti-vaxxer movement pose?
I think the anti-vaccine movement or anti-vaccine sentiment is a challenge to any vaccine program, whether it's COVID-19 or any of our routine vaccinations. And there's been a lot of effort to try to understand that movement and to address it. The anti-vaccine sentiment runs a wide range from people who are just a bit hesitant just because they don't feel there's enough information to people who are philosophically opposed to vaccination. The latter tends to be the minority, maybe a couple of percent, but in terms of vaccine hesitancy, it may be as high as 20 or 30%, where people have some concerns. The important part about addressing vaccine hesitancy is to try to be as open and as transparent as possible, to provide as much safety information as is possible, and to address people's concerns both on an aggregate level, but then also on an individual level. The Public Health Agency of Canada understands that vaccine hesitancy can be an important factor in the response once we have a COVID-19 vaccine. And it's one of its priorities to CERN's, the Canadian Immunization Research Network's Social Science and Humanities Network, to address and do research on those concerns in preparation for potential vaccine hesitancy as the vaccines are rolled out. So it is a high priority in our research.
So could you confirm how large a threat you feel that the anti-vaxxer movement is in Canada and what we're currently doing to counteract it? And if you're satisfied with that, and if not, what else would need to be done?
Overwhelmingly in Canada, Canadians are pro-vaccine. The vaccine hesitancy probably accounts for approximately 20% of the population. When we talk about vaccine hesitancy, that doesn't mean 20% of people aren't getting immunized, but they may delay their immunization, want to try an alternate schedule. So it runs that whole range across the board from just a little bit hesitant up to absolutely not being immunized. The absolutely not being immunized is only a couple percent to our best understanding. Improving vaccine coverage has been a high priority of the Public Health Agency of Canada and recent governments. And there has been a fair amount of funding that's been given to CERN to understand and improve vaccine coverage over the past 5 years. So we know a lot more about vaccine hesitancy and developing interventions to try to address it.
Thank you. My next question is to all.
Ma prochaine question est pour tous les témoins. Qui voudrait commencer en premier? Allez-y.
To the interpreters, I think we're getting an interpretation on the wrong channel.
Oh, okay. So my next question then is to each of the groups represented. How can Canada support more research in biomedicine? And I'd appreciate if you could elaborate on what we're doing well, on what we should improve, and what we should be doing to do so. So why don't we start with the Innovative Medicines group?
Thank you very much. I hate to sound like a broken record on this particular question, but probably the most important piece that we could do in Canada would be to get that balanced whole of government approach to the two issues of cost containment and the investment attraction programs that are in place. So on the one side, we do have PMPRB. It plays a good role for Canadians when well implemented. But its current measures are too extreme. When companies are looking at losing up to 70–80% of their revenues, they don't have anything left to invest, basically. On the other hand, we have some exciting programs out of ICED with their HBEST, Health Biosciences Economic Strategy Table, where they want to double investment in Canada, double employment levels, et cetera, by 2025. This is something that gets the companies that are my members very, very excited. But there is an imbalance right now without, as I say, a whole of government approach needing to balance those two off. So the regulatory regime needs to be taken down a notch so that we can take advantage of investment, obviously all to get the best medicines to Canadians. So that, and I mentioned as well the time to list, making sure our system is as smooth and well sequenced as possible.
Okay, and the CGPA, sorry.
Yeah. Hi there. Hi, it's Peter Hardig from Apotex. I'll start off by saying, first of all, this was fascinating, and I'm voting for IMC to find a vaccine sooner than possible for Canadians. So keep up the great work. I did want to say on the generic side, and I can speak Apotex specifically, we spend close to $200 million a year on research and development in Canada, and a lot of this is in biosimilars. So I think for us, it's really around sustainability and predictability and having a pricing model and system that we can see out in time, that we can plan our business more long-term. So that predictability and pricing is going to be key. And a lot of the things that Ms. Freilich said, I agree with around regulatory regime, et cetera. I'll turn it over to Jim if you've got anything to add.
No, I think that's fine, Peter. Yeah, we have the largest R&D company in Canada, as Peter mentioned. We also have the largest company in Quebec. So I think that while we are focused on the vaccine, our message today is we have thought about this. We put out a blueprint. on how do we ensure the 3/4 of the medicines that are critical, that are genericized, continue to flow into Canada, and so that other countries can't put up export blocks in other ways. We want to strengthen our industry, build our industry in Canada, and we are recommending the government also build up safety stocks so that if there's a wave 2 or a future pandemic or problem, we're better ready than we were this time.
Okay, Dr.
Thank you very much. Mr. Van Buyen, thank you. We go now to Dr. Kitchen. Dr. Kitchen, 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you everybody for being here today, and your presentation is greatly appreciated and enlightening us on and educating us a little bit more on a lot of the stuff that we've heard. And throughout these meetings, we've heard significant responses on issues, and one that is concerning to me, and I heard from most of you today on the issue of supply chain challenges and risks, and those supply chain challenges. I believe that I think it was Mr. Keon, you talked about the movement is slower and movement is more costly. We've heard about potential drug shortages, etc. And I go back to a number of meetings back when I was looking at things a little bit more closely than I have today, where we were shortage of epinephrine and Diovan, gabapentin, carbithol, cyclosporin, Novomoxin. Many of these drugs are definitely needed by Canadians today, and we're seeing shortages of it. And would it be interesting to hear comments? Dr. Neem, I think you had mentioned it on issues of potential supply issues. I'm wondering first if you could start, and we'll then go on to the CGPA.
Yeah, well, my expertise is in vaccines, and it is extremely difficult to make biologic products. If you have a situation where you're developing an infant vaccine, for example, Pediasel, and if you have a quality issue, that whole vat will have to be removed, and that is 18 months in delay. We have to replenish the supply. It's very, very challenging. We do everything that we can to maintain the integrity of our manufacturing processes, and that's why our level of quality is so high. That's why Health Canada comes in and inspects us, regularly. We do our best. We're trying to not have breakdowns in supply, but it is part of the manufacturing process. We work with Health Canada. We have drug shortage notification protocols on the Health Canada website. And so whenever we are in a situation where we start to run short, we will always post them. And if it's a situation where a patient is running into a drug shortage, we always ask them to call their healthcare professional to look for alternatives.
Sorry, Ms. Freilich, do you have any comments?
No, just consistent with Dr. Neem. We've been monitoring very vigilantly throughout this time period. We check with our members regularly. We do everything we can to make sure that drugs are in full supply. Our members have told us there have not been problems. This is on the patented drug side. Mr. Keon has a slightly different, and his organization has a slightly different position. But essentially, it is something that we've just been monitoring. We've been supportive of the 30-day refill limit during the worst time of the pandemic to make sure that the drug supply is consistent. So right now, we've been very, very fortunate. There have been no significant issues in supply of any of the drugs that our members produce.
Thank you. Mr. Keon, I'm going to get you to try and answer a little bit to that first question, but also in your executive summary, you talk about warehouse and vault capacity. And so I'd like to throw this into it as well as being one of the issues that might be a challenge and a risk that we see in supply chain. And we've heard particularly where we had the nest storage where masks, et cetera, were becoming obsolete and expiry dates, et cetera. And so I'm wondering how that might fit in as well in some of your comments dealing with the issues that you see that we need to move forward on.
Yes, thank you. The issue of drug shortages has been an issue for the last 5 years and more worldwide. It's not just a Canadian issue. I think part of it has been the sort of interaction of increased regulatory scrutiny around the world. Agencies have gone to locations where they hadn't before. So I think that's a good thing. Products are safer than before. Also combined, however, with very low pricing in Canada and internationally. And you know, I touched on it earlier, the how low can you go model, I don't think works. I quoted the Deputy Prime Minister earlier in my comments. I think we need to step back and look at the pricing situation. I think we need to develop a policy around trying to encourage domestic production, domestic R&D plus manufacturing, plus, as you mentioned, warehousing, vault capacity. These are all expensive investments to make. We want them here. We want them in Canada. And I think pricing plus some of the regulatory flexibilities that Health Canada has shown during the pandemic, we're arguing we'd like to look at those going forward. If products can be brought in safe during this pandemic period, we think that can go forward. I know Peter wanted to say a couple of words on this too, if we have time.
Yeah, I think, again, from the generic industry perspective, and then again, from an Apotex perspective, any drug shortage is an issue. I would say, however, one thing that we have to learn from this pandemic is to strengthen our domestic manufacturing capabilities. 2 to 3%, Canada, 2 to 3% of the global pharmaceutical market. And my key message is today, we have to learn from COVID-19, because what happened around the world, there were restrictions on exports. And I can tell you what gets me out of bed in the morning and what gets all of my colleagues, it's the patient. Whether you have anxiety, depression, cardiovascular illness, oncology, we go to work every day to make sure that there's continuity of therapy for Canadians. And we need to make sure, because a lot of the manufacturing has left this country. Apotex produces almost 80% of all the drugs we sell are manufactured in Ontario for Canadians. And I can tell you right now, 2 stories, tamoxifen. Tamoxifen was a global shortage. Be it not for our facilities in Canada, we actually reprioritized all of our production schedule for Canadians. No one's doing.
Well, I've still got you here in a short. We did have a where Mr. Davies talked about remdesivir. Do we have the capacity to make that?
Dr. Kitchen, thank you.
I think that's part of our blueprint. And if you look at bigger, you know, if I take that product, we've talked about retrofitting our facilities, working with Health Canada, working with the Canadian government, working with Ontario. We're prepared to do what we need to do to support Canadians. And
Thank
now,
you.
yeah. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I have to cut you off. We go to Mr. Fisher now. Mr. Fisher, please go ahead, 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all of our amazing witnesses that are here today to provide their level of expertise. And not because he's in Nova Scotia and 3-decade Nova Scotian, but I'm going to stick with Dr. Halpern if I could. And that's not because there's no Bruins jersey behind Dr. Neem. The Canadian Centre for Vaccinology is leading the first human clinical trials in Canada for a COVID-19 vaccine. Dr. Halpern, can you describe the technology used and how it differs from other potential vaccines?
Sure. I mean, the trial that we're doing with CanSino, which may or may not be the first, depends on when the vaccine arrives. But that vaccine is, as I mentioned before, an adenovirus 5, which is a normal human respiratory pathogen that causes an upper respiratory infection, which has been modified to express the spike protein to make the spike protein of the SARS-CoV-2 virus. And therefore, when the host sees that platform, it makes antibodies against the spike protein, which then hopefully would protect against when somebody comes in contact with it. The adenovirus 5 has been modified, so it's a non-replicating virus, which means that it doesn't replicate in the host. So that's the platform, that's how it works.
Where are you right now with regards to safety and effectiveness, and are you able to provide any of your early results?
We haven't started the trial here in Canada with that vaccine as of yet. We're hoping it will start very in the very near future. But that vaccine has undergone phase 1 and phase 2 studies in China. The phase 1 studies were quite successful and were published in the Lancet Infectious Disease. Phase 2 studies have now been completed, and my understanding is that those should be published within the next week or two in the same journal, also showing safety and good immunogenicity. The effectiveness or the efficacy of those vaccines will need to await the phase 3 studies that'll be taking place.
Dr. Halperin, I'm sorry, when you hold your mic, could you hold the cable and not actually touch the mic?
Very
That'd
good.
Be good. Thank you.
When the clinical trials roll out across Canada, will it just be in Nova Scotia, or will you be going to other provinces? And will you be utilizing or testing vulnerable populations in these clinical trials?
So we'll be using all of our CERN clinical trial sites as these trials roll out. Medicago is going to be using sites across Canada with their vaccine. And we are talking with at least 4 other than CanSino that will be rolling out over hopefully the next several months as they become available and ready for phase 1 studies. We have, of our 10 clinical trial sites, 5 of them have a lot of experience in phase 1 studies, but most of these trials are being designed as phase 1 and 2 studies. So the phase 2 portions will be done in several of those other cities. So it'll be a cross-Canada effort to undertake these trials.
Excellent. When we talk about immunity from folks who have had COVID-19, I don't know if the science is really there yet, but we've heard that it could be just 2 to 3 months. What does something like that what does something like that do impacting an outcome of a vaccine?
It's very important, and we don't know have full information about a natural immunity after natural infection from SARS-CoV-2. That's a very important priority for the Immunity Task Force. Canada's Immunity Task Force is undertaking seroepidemiology studies on patients, just on the general population, to see how many have become infected without any symptoms and without being diagnosed, as well as to follow patients who've recovered from SARS-CoV-2 to see how long they maintain their antibody. Again, we're not 100% sure yet, and that research is still underway about what is the most important factor in the immune system, because we talk about antibody, but there's also cellular immunity, which in viruses is very important. So how long the protection is something we need to know. And that's with every vaccine, not just SARS-CoV-2 vaccines, which is why for the measles vaccine, for example, you get 1 dose as a child and you're protected for life. But with the influenza virus, it lasts, for perhaps 1 season. And we know that for influenza virus, even by the second half of a season, immunity is dropping off. So where SARS-CoV-2 will fit in, that time will tell. But if it's not very long duration, it may just mean we need to have second boosters, which again becomes how many doses are we going to need over time.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Fisher.
Thank you.
Nous allons maintenant à Monsieur.
We'll now go to Mr. Désilets. You have 2.5 minutes, so go ahead. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question for Mrs. Fralick or Dr. Neem. Kelly Greengrub, who is a professor at the pharmacy of the University of Waterloo, is undertaking research and is validating medicine procurement in Canada, and she considered that Canada was already facing one of its worst crises when it comes to medication supply. When it comes to prescription medicine, 1,000 medicines were already facing shortages before COVID-19. So she says that there's a lack of transparency, and it's usually very hard to plan in normal times. It's very hard to know where the medication is being produced and where they end up. So it's usually very hard to have a follow-up on this process. Could you please tell us what you think about what she said, and do you agree with her statement?
I will start by just acknowledging, as several have, Mr. Keon in particular, that the drug industry is global, whether generic or prescription, patented drugs. It is a global industry with inputs from around the world. And so there are a multiple number of ways in which the supply chain, the flow of drugs can be affected. So that's sort of a starting point. My apologies. The drug companies, all of them, are required by law, and they do follow this. They're required to report any drug shortages on a Government of Canada website, drugshortages.ca. We, in fact, have been monitoring that drug site on a daily basis just to see where the shortages might be. And so I'm not quite sure how to respond to a charge of lack of transparency, because this is followed through. But as I said earlier, with our companies, we have been extremely vigilant in monitoring any drug shortages, not only from the website itself, but talking with our companies on a regular basis, sometimes daily. And while we recognize the need to continue to be vigilant, we have not found ourselves in a position where we've been unable to supply the drugs that have been needed. That being said, I think there's a slightly different story on the generic side, and so you may wish to also throw your question over to Mr. Keon. Thank you.
Well, I'm happy to answer again.
Merci.
Just quickly, we have worked. We have worked throughout in the generic pharmaceutical industry throughout very closely with the distributors and pharmacies in Canada, and with our own member companies. Our own member companies are as was said, required to report all shortages. Wherever there has been a shortage, there was concern at one time about the increased use of sedatives and muscle relaxants, et cetera, in intensive care units treating COVID patients. Our companies were able to repurpose to increase production, to increase the products coming into Canada. We worked with Health Canada. We worked with the group purchasing organizations in the provinces. So we ensured that products were available in all cases throughout the pandemic. So I think, as we said earlier in our presentation, we're actually quite proud of the fact that lack of medicines, shortages of medicines never became a major problem for Canada, even at the worst of the pandemic shock that we faced.
Thank you, Mr. Desley. We go now to Mr. Davies. Mr. Davies, please go ahead, 2.5 minutes.
Thank you. Dr. Halperin, according to a May 19th news release from Dalhousie University, the National Research Council will work with manufacturers so the vaccine can be produced and distributed here at home, or hopefully a vaccine, if it proves successful. Are you confident that Canada has sufficient domestic manufacturing capacity to produce a sufficient supply of vaccines for all Canadians, particularly if we will have to have booster shots and have extensive revaccinations?
Manufacturing capacity in Canada is one of the biggest concerns, and that was highlighted very early on in the pandemic and before. Part of the funds that the government announced early on in the pandemic were to be provided to the National Research Council, NRC, to upgrade their facility in Montreal to permit them to do what's called GMP, good manufacturing process, manufacturing of the vaccine. Based on that, my understanding is that they will be able to supply the needs with CanSino's vaccine. Now, obviously, that's not the only vaccine that's being developed, and each manufacturer, when they're doing studies and getting supported, in order to get support from the Canadian government, have to demonstrate, my understanding is what their plan is for manufacturing. So whether it be Medicago or Vito Intervac proposed vaccine, all have to look at the manufacturing capacity. And I think manufacturing capacity will be an issue. Obviously, the larger multinationals, like Dr. Neem mentioned, Sanofi, Pasteur, certainly have manufacturing capacity.
Would you?
If I could just add as well, and I apologize for jumping in on Dr. Halpern's question, but the fact is this is where collaboration occurs. Like, produce 60 million doses of infant vaccines each year on the Toronto site. This is where we have to sit down and talk. We could potentially retrofit something at the Toronto site, which could help out. I mean, it's all about Canadians and getting Canadians vaccines.
Right. Well, to each of you doctors then, would you recommend that the federal government develop a national plan in order to ensure that we have domestic manufacturing capacity for any vaccine that hopefully will be developed for Canadians?
Absolutely. As I mentioned in my initial comments, I think that's part of. We all know what the steps are in order to get vaccines to individuals, and hopefully all of that is being worked on simultaneously. There is now a vaccine task group that's been tasked to oversee the process, and I think manufacturing is clearly on their radar.
And just to remember that there are actually companies like GlaxoSmithKline. GlaxoSmithKline has a great pandemic plan. The only problem is it's for influenza, and we didn't expect it for COVID. So there needs to be some expansion on the infectious diseases that we're covering in pandemic plan.
Thank you, Mr. Davies.
Thank you.
So that brings round 2 to a close. I'd like to thank all the witnesses for sharing with us your time today and all of your expertise. It's most helpful to our study. And with that, we will suspend and bring in the next panel. So we are now suspended. please wait until I recognize you by name, except during questioning. I'll ask the questioners to indicate to whom they wish to respond to the question. And when you're ready to speak, you can click on the microphone icon to activate your mic. I remind you that all comments should be addressed through the chair, and interpretation in this video conference will work very much like in the regular committee meeting. You have a choice at the bottom of your screen of either floor, English, or French. And as you're speaking, if you plan to alternate from one language to the other, you'll need also to switch the interpretation channel so that it aligns with the language you are speaking. You may want to allow for a short pause when switching languages. When you're not speaking, your mic should be on mute. So I'd like to now welcome our second panel of witnesses. Appearing as an individual, we have Mario Pasami, Senior Advisor, who was, I believe, Senior Advisor commissioned to investigate the introduction and spread of severe acute respiratory syndrome, 2003 to 2007. We have MAPSTEAD. For MAPSTEAD, we have Mr. Paramveer Nagpal, Founder and Chief Executive Officer. And for Medtronic Canada, we have Patrick Coupé, Senior Director, Health Systems Strategies. I will ask the panelists to make their statements. Each group will have up to 10 minutes. We'll start with Mr. Pasami. Pasami, please go ahead, sir. 10 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to brief you on how COVID-19 has revealed that the system to protect Canadian health workers in a public health emergency is broken and must be fixed urgently before the expected second pandemic wave. From the start of the outbreak, the Public Health Agency of Canada has said that droplet precautions, including surgical masks, are sufficient protection for our healthcare workers because COVID-19 could not spread through the air and only spreads through large droplets. In those early days, Canadian experts who supported the agency's position said if COVID-19 was airborne, we would see, quote, outbreaks in places adhering to droplet prevention. One expert said, quote, if this was airborne, all those healthcare workers would be getting sick. Here's what's happened since. Nationally, Canadian healthcare workers comprise nearly 1 in 5 of all COVID-19 infections in Canada. That is almost 3 times the global average as reported by the International Council of Nurses. It is also approximately 4 times the rate in China, where they began requiring the use of airborne precautions, including N95s, in late January. Most health worker infections in China, occurred before these higher precautions were implemented. This troubling situation is why I have been retained by the Canadian Federation of Nurses Unions to use the lens of the SARS Commission to investigate why so many Canadian health workers are being infected. While the investigation is at an early stage, I would like to share some preliminary findings and recommendations. The first preliminary finding is regarding the precautionary principle and the question of airborne transmission. When your committee met on April 7th, dedicated Canadian experts, to the best of intentions, said that COVID-19 only spreads through large droplets and contaminated surfaces, and that surgical masks were sufficient protection. N95s, they said, were only needed for high-risk procedures. Since then, the science has evolved. The researchers in Hong Kong who first identified SARS airborne transmissibility in 2004 have recently published a peer-reviewed article suggesting that large droplets are negligible transmission route compared to airborne. The CDC in the US is now suggesting that infected surfaces may only play a minor role in COVID-19 transmission. And most importantly, an open letter published today by 239 scientists from 32 countries to the WHO and public health agencies states that studies, quote, have demonstrated beyond any reasonable doubt that viruses are released during exhalation, talking, and coughing in microdroplets small enough to remain in the air and pose a risk of exposure at distances beyond 1 to 2 meters. Time will tell who is right and who is wrong in this debate, though I believe the scales are increasingly tipping towards growing evidence of airborne transmission. This is precisely the kind of situation where the precautionary principle, the core finding of the SARS Commission, should be invoked. When there is uncertainty about a new pathogen, it calls for erring on the side of safety and protecting health workers with the higher protections of airborne precautions, including N95s or higher, until the science is clarified. This is what China has done so successfully that the WHO has concluded that COVID-19 transmission among health workers and in healthcare settings is not a factor in China. Also keep in mind that it was not until a year after SARS that the best evidence of its airborne transmissibility under certain conditions was published. Justice Archie Campbell, who led the SARS Commission, found that this was strong validation of the prudence of taking a precautionary approach until the science is settled. I thus recommend that, having regard to growing evidence of airborne transmission, and with news that domestic production of N95s is coming on stream, the Public Health Agency of Canada invoke the precautionary principle and require airborne precautions, including fit-tested N95s for all healthcare workers in all healthcare settings with suspect and confirmed COVID-19 cases. I also recommend that federal legislation be amended to require the agency to take a precautionary approach to all worker safety guidance. The second preliminary finding is with regards to our severe shortage of N95 respirators, even though the SARS Commission recommended stockpiling this vital piece of equipment. The federal health minister and the chief medical officer of health have claimed stockpiling was a provincial responsibility. I respectfully disagree. Ottawa destroyed 2 million N95s last year. It should have replaced them and purchased more, as the Prime Minister now seems to concede. Remember, the federal stockpile had only 100,000 N95s entering the pandemic. But setting this aside, I believe that the Chief Medical Officer of Health and her immediate predecessor failed in their responsibility under Section 12 of the Public Health Agency of Canada Act to warn Parliament and Canadians we weren't ready, that we didn't have enough personal protective equipment, and especially N95s. Now, when Dr. Tam's office and that of her Ontario counterpart were being established in 2004, Justice Campbell advised both governments to make chief medical officers of health the public's guardian by giving them the rights, duties, and independence to speak out on public health risks. Both levels of government listens, and the wording of Section 12 of the Federal Act and the equivalent Section 81 of the Ontario Act are virtually identical. Over the past 5 years, Dr. Tam and her immediate predecessor have issued 7 reports to Parliament and the public on a variety of important public health issues, including on alcohol and substance abuse. None, however, examined if we were ready for an existential public health threat like a pandemic, including whether we had enough N95 respirators, despite the explicit intent of the Act. In view of this systemic failure, I recommend that Parliament consider, on an urgent basis, amending the Public Health Agency of Canada Act to require the Chief Medical Officer of Health to report each year in detail on the state of Canada's preparedness for future public health emergencies, and to request that the Auditor General of Canada independently evaluate on a regular basis the Public Health Agency of Canada's ability to monitor and evaluate our public health emergency preparedness. Thank you.
Thank you. We go now to Mapstead, Mr. Nagpal, please go ahead, sir, 10 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of committee. I'd like to start off by giving you some background about our company, Mapstead. We have been in the business since 2014. We're an award-winning Canadian technology firm that provides highly scalable and accurate location-based solutions inside and outside any building without the use of additional external hardware, such as Bluetooth beacon or Wi-Fi connectivity. Now, instead, our technology uses innovative, adaptive data fusion and self-learning algorithms to deliver an accurate and scalable positioning using any off-the-shelf smartphone. So this means our technology can work anywhere, including the areas that are usually thought of as dead zones, like underground locations or skyscrapers. We further expanded our core technology and developed an extensive location-based service platform, which includes seamless outdoor-indoor wayfinding, asset tracking, targeted alerts and notification, analytics, location intelligence, and secure contact tracing. We work with a wide variety of businesses and industries, including retail, healthcare, and higher education. Now, our technology has been recognized as one of the most advanced location-based technologies in the world, with 62 patents granted to date. We have deployed our technology across 255 million square feet worldwide. Now, over the last few months, we have seen an unprecedented response from the technology sector to the global spread of COVID-19 in our communities. Most countries have focused on developing technologies to help with contact tracing to try to flatten the curve and also prevent the healthcare system from becoming overwhelmed. Singapore was an early adopter of a community-driven contact tracing app. And now, European member states are adopting a decentralized Bluetooth model for contact tracing. In this model, no data is stored centrally, ensuring that it's not possible to reconstruct an individual's relationship or an identity. They are planning an international roaming feature that could help revive the travel and tourism across the area. Now, each country would have its own app, but the apps could talk to each other and help make travel across the region safer. Other countries like China went beyond contact tracing and developed additional uses for location technology to help people access the products and services during this challenging time by just helping them check the store levels for masks, sanitizers, and gloves at nearby stores, and also moving a significant portion of their everyday healthcare to online consultations. In addition, they adopted the use of health QR codes to ensure workplaces that had to remain open were safer. If an employee received a green QR code, they were able to work. A yellow or a red code would require self-isolation. Now, population density maps have also been useful to help pinpoint the vulnerable populations, large gatherings, and along with some real-time data related to health and travel, to provide the citizens with the visual representations of where potential hotspots are likely to occur, helping them to reduce their risk by avoiding those areas. As we have seen recently, there have been some challenges and concerns with this type of technology, and one of the main ones being privacy. Canada is looking to adopt a decentralized model of contact tracing moving forward, which will help address many of the privacy fears that currently exist. But right now, this concern has led to a poor adoption rate for the use of these apps, making them less effective. Alberta's app, for example, has been downloaded by just 200,000 people out of a population of approximately 4.4 million. We need to have an approximately 60% of the population using this type of app for it to be effective. Now, as the country moves to reopen in stages, we need a way to ensure we can keep our population safe while allowing for Canada's economic growth to move forward again. Essentially, we need to find a way to safely function in a society with the virus. And as we wait for the vaccine to be developed, location-based technology will play an important role in this process. First, integrating the digital contact tracing technology with traditional contact tracers can prove to be more effective in stamping out the virus hotspots and tracking the spread of the disease. Integrating these two approaches ensures that we address the issue inherent to each method. For example, traditional contact tracing's limitations of scalability, notification delays, and contact identification in public spaces. And even if we don't have a full adoption of digital contact tracing technology, many of the gaps could be filled by traditional methods, ensuring greater effectiveness overall. As we get back to using many non-essential services, additional location-based technology can keep us safer. It's not just enough to ensure our healthcare system doesn't get overwhelmed by COVID-19 cases. We need to work to accommodate the patients who need diagnostics and care for the conditions and help them safely and securely access those services when they need. Patients must have the access to timely cancer screenings, and people with compromised immune system need a way to safely plan their hospital or clinic visit for treatment so they don't unnecessarily expose themselves to the virus by coming into prolonged contact with the members of the public. Seamless outdoor-indoor navigation technology combined with location-based notifications and analytics can help these patients plan optimized routes from finding the closest hospital entrance to their appointments, to planning the shortest route through the building to multiple appointments in a different section of the hospital. It can further help by sending notifications telling them when is it safe to enter a waiting area and giving them instructions detailing any safety precautions that must be followed. Heat maps could also be used to prevent bottlenecks and show the busy areas so the vulnerable patients could avoid walking into the situation that would increase the risk to their health. This approach would also allow appointments to be spaced out, allow ample time for cleaning before and after the patient visits, and would help ease the anxiety of such visits significantly, helping to ensure that fewer people put potentially life-saving tests and treatments because of fear of just getting infected. Ontario's upcoming cloud-based case management system that will connect the lab system and the public health system is a fantastic other example where location-based technology could complement a service to make going to the appointments for test and diagnostics safer. This technology would send patients to the labs close to where they live and use targeted notifications to let patients know when the doctors and technicians are ready for them. So they don't need to wait with the others in the room, potentially just increasing the risk of exposure. Now, to address any privacy concerns, all the data should be stored locally on each device for a limited period of time, and that also being anonymized. Using location technology in this way would allow people to continue to practice effective social and physical distancing while allowing them to access the needed services. This type of approach would also work in the malls and big box retail stores. This type of navigation technology would not only give customers the shortest or the most optimized route to the department they need, but could also lead them directly to the product they're looking for, eliminating the need to wander around the store aisles in the frustration trying to locate it. This would help reduce the time people spend inside and around the groups of shoppers, reducing their exposure risk. Many stores, including grocery chains, face a problem with lineups as fewer shoppers are permitted and admitted into the store at once. These lines put people in contact with others for long periods of time as they wait outside. This is specifically true ahead of holidays and long weekends. Now, this is where the location-based solutions really shine. By ensuring essential services like grocery stores can create a safe shopping environment for their customers, enforcing physical distancing measures and reducing the possibility of spread of the virus. Stores can use this technology to set up geofence around their location and control the foot traffic into the store without any lineup, preventing crowding and bottlenecks. This technology will continue to play a critical role as we move past the initial measures to help slow the spread of the virus and start to ease the restrictions and open more businesses in transition back to a new normal. Use of this technology go far beyond healthcare or retail applications. Contact tracing apps can be a trade-off between privacy and effectiveness. But if we integrate this technology with traditional methods and supplement it with additional location-based products and solutions like indoor navigation, targeted notification, geofencing, tagging, this could help more Canadians safely return to the work, attend medical appointments, events, or extracurricular activities, and much, much more, as we wait for a vaccine or an effective treatment of COVID-19 to be developed. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Nagfeld, I'm advised that the sound quality of your mic has degraded. Perhaps before you next have a chance to speak, if you unplug your mic, plug it back in,
sure,
and also select it and reselect it. Okay, thank you very much. We will go now to Medtronic Canada. Mr. Huppe, please go ahead. 10 minutes, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Thank you very much, Chair, members of the committee, and distinguished invited guests, witnesses. I'd like to thank you for this opportunity to share some of our feedback on Canada's government response to this pandemic. So if I may, I'd like to begin by congratulating the government at some of the things that have been accomplished so far, such as active recognition of the importance of maintaining international relationships, given the integration of the global supply chain, of course, to ensure that infected patients have access to this as quickly as possible, and played an important role there in teleconferences with the G20. The creation of active plan to mobilize the industry to meet the challenges of the pandemic. The government has also established a centralized supply essential supplies, and finally to implement financial supports for those who have lost their jobs due to the pandemic. If I may, I'd like to, perhaps for the benefit of all, to humbly introduce you to Medtronic. It's the world's largest medical technology services and solutions company. 90,000 employees worldwide, with 1,000 employees in Canada, with a presence coast to coast in marketing, R&D, production, and education and training. Our company is focused on 5 key areas: cardiovascular disease, diabetes, minimally invasive therapies, neuroscience, and consulting services, which help healthcare systems reduce waiting times and also improve the experience for both patients and providers. We have, much like other companies in the medical device industry, we have also been affected by this pandemic. On the one hand, demand for ventilators, pulse oximeters, extracorporeal oxygenation devices, and other respiratory management devices have increased. There have been 2 consequences to this, of course. First, we've moved into humanitarian mode with respect to allocating the high-demand devices, rather than the conventional method where we would respond only to requests and demand supply. In addition, we've allowed free access to our IP, intellectual property, for portable fan that other specialty partners, including Ventilators for Canadians, can manufacture more of these devices locally. And finally, our maintenance technicians and clinical trainers have worked tirelessly to coordinate the installation, maintenance, and training of healthcare personnel in particular with regards to these ventilators and fans. The cancellation of the airlines are shut, made the task particularly difficult, but our clinical teams continue to support critical surgeries despite the crisis. While we provide nonetheless technology and services to more than 70 diseases, the cancellation and postponement of elective surgery forced us to suspend operations for several months. Despite the financial impact, we did not lay off anyone due to the pandemic. Instead, we're preparing to support the resumption of surgical procedures by providing our experts and products to healthcare systems, while offering our expertise in clinical care pathways, analysis, and wait time reduction, and to redefine patient triage protocols to optimize procedures and speed up the return home following a procedure. While considering the resumption of these elective surgeries, we truly believe that Medtronic Canada and the industry, through international experience of multinational corporations and the ingenuity of our own small and medium-sized businesses in the field, can be part of the solution rather than simply being confined to the role of suppliers in a traditional sense. There are three areas I'd like to focus on in my comments today where we believe we can offer tangible and proven solutions, and I repeat, to resume quickly procedures and ensure health and well-being of our fellow citizens. First, the transition to hospital home, or recovery at home, the search for solutions, and thirdly, the optimization of clinical pathways. Recovery at home or hospital at home is very important. The pandemic has clearly exposed the importance of keeping patients out of hospitals once they receive care. Digital health will certainly play a big role. It allows the hospital level to respect physical distancing, first of all, and reduce the risk of contamination. But even more importantly, the technology allows us to follow patients at home and reduce their visit to hospital center or emergency care. Obviously, health is essentially a provincial jurisdiction. However, the federal government has an opportunity to leverage digital health for veterans, for example, and Aboriginal populations it serves to become an example for Canadian provinces to follow in terms of healthcare innovation. Technologies will enable remote monitoring, virtual tours. This has been available for more than a decade. However, we've seen faster adaptation to these last 3 months than in the last 10 years. This has become the tipping point, and we can't really afford to go back in time. Canadian businesses have become pioneers in this regard. According to the Canada Health Infoway, prior to COVID-19 pandemic, only 10-20% of the healthcare visits were made virtually. Today, that approach is reaching 60%. The federal government and each of the provincial governments have had the option to continue using these visits during the pandemic. Digital health is not only about physical distancing, it's also an incredible tool to reach patients in remote areas. For example, a patient, a veteran, or a First Nations person with a pacemaker has to get checked up once a year at least to check the batteries. And it takes about 10 minutes. But if the individual lives in the far north or in remote areas, it might take hours or even days to get to the appropriate clinic. Using a form of digital technology that's been around for years and can consist of performing a remote examination in the comfort of his home, well, this would reduce the risk of contamination, reduction in cost, and an increase in efficiency of the service provided. To date, this option is limited because doctors can't bill for their time and because patients don't have a stable internet connection. Both these issues can be addressed, I'm sure, with support and help from the federal government. Now, on the supply side, in order to access technologies and solutions to help patients get safer care in a timely fashion, the government needs to focus on procurement. The pandemic has proven beyond a doubt that procurement is not a simple function and that simply allows an acquisition of equipment. It requires men and women with strategic vision, a good knowledge of the technologies to be acquired, a solid understanding of the new values-based procurement, particularly a system that's been adopted elsewhere in the world, particularly in Europe. The federal government has taken two measures on procurement of interest and note. First, it's centralized procurement for fans, ventilators, and PPE, freeing hospitals and industry for some of the burden, allowing them to focus on what they do best, which is, on the one hand, take care of patients, and secondly, provide equipment. Secondly, it began to look at innovation and demand-driven innovation policies. What I can say for the time being is that innovative demand-based innovation policies are policies which force innovation and finding of the proper solutions. In implementing demand-driven innovation policies, the government was beginning to follow the recommendations of the HBEST strategy tables. Of course, in conjunction with ESDE and ICED. This crisis has demonstrated to everyone concerned the importance of having a more advanced manufacturing sector in Canada, better integration. I suggest that the government can do this by revisiting the recommendations of HBEST, which the federal government put in place in 2017. I'd like to close on some of the solutions for integrated solutions, three of which supply-side policy recommendations relate to informatics, human resources, capital, and two which are demand-side health policy related. Now, some of these have been pushed off or been recommended before, but before the emergence of this virus in Canada, hospitals were working in full capacity. If we don't act rapidly, these are going to become more critical. Hospitals will also have to respond to the demand of patients which are using digital visits more often now. Still, there's hope and a great deal of optimism. Fraser Health, for example, in British Columbia, now conducts pre-admission assessments for surgical patients in a virtual mode. In Ontario, virtual care is being used for more than 50% of patients at the Peter Munk Heart Centre. In New Brunswick, Vitalité Health Network has set up a specialized pacemaker clinic, accessible by car to reduce the growing number of patients waiting to have their cardiac device checked. Medtronic has the expertise and tools to help government develop these types of new protocols to create patient-centered pathways to help the health system meet these new challenges. We're committed to and accountable for the promised results. So on behalf of Metric Canada, I'd like to thank you once again for the opportunity to provide you with my comments. And I hope that today's session is just the beginning of a concerted effort to harness the leadership and the courage of our governments, together with the expertise of the academic community and the resilience, expertise, and ingenuity of our Canadian manufacturing sector and international subsidiaries who've chosen to invest in Canada for the benefit of all Canadians. Thank you.
We will start our questioning now. We will undertake 2 rounds of questions. We will start the first round with Dr. Kitchen. Dr. Kitchen, please go ahead. 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, everybody, for your presentations. It's greatly appreciated. Dr. Pisami, I really appreciate you being here and the work you did with the SARS Commission, because that facilitated the start of PHAC, as you mentioned a little bit earlier today, and the setting up of protocols and policies that to deal with pandemics. And we've seen that not only has Canada done that, but other parts of the world did that at that time. And in fact, when we look at Taiwan what Taiwan did, they did the exact same thing, and they implemented those policies and procedures from day one, right from the very start. And we brought forward a number of times, my colleagues and I, with the minister as well as the government on the issues of shutting down the borders, of using face masks, et cetera, of testing. And whereas, as I said, Taiwan closed its borders, it utilized masks right from day one. They used temperature screening from day one, et cetera. And they've done a tremendous job in reducing their impact with the COVID-19 and reduce the number of deaths. So I have a question on the issue of the temperature screening. And last month, the committee, we questioned officials from Transport Canada regarding the effectiveness of the temperature screening for travelers during COVID-19 pandemic, specifically at airports. Dr. Tam has said herself that when it comes to SARS, temperature screening was ineffective. My colleagues and I asked the Transport Canada officials to provide us with scientific new evidence that would support the effectiveness of temperature screening. However, they've only provided us what seems to be an opinion piece without any scientific paper. And in fact, they just state the greater number of COVID-19 cases increases the likelihood of temperature screening and effectiveness. I'm wondering from you, your experience and your review with the SARS epidemic, what scientific data was there that proved the effectiveness of temperature screening? You're on mute. There you go.
Thank you very much. I apologize for that. That's a very good question. During SARS, there was some work on temperature screening, but it was inconclusive, and the information was that it appeared to be not effective. But this occurred over a short period of time. The equipment at the time was not as good as it is today, as effective as today. So I think it's really warrants in a very speedy fashion to examine what the best technology is and does it work. I mean, I think that one of the things that I've noticed with PHAC is just a lack of urgency to look at new technologies, to really examine the best way to address this. And I think that this may be an example.
Thank you. Now, you indicated the fact, I mean, in the issue of temperature screening that can produce inaccurate results for a variety of reasons, which could include proper calibration of the machine, user error, environmental variations. The technology has changed, obviously. This could lead to false positives and false negatives, creating incorrect data for scientists, as well as potential risk of to public health in general. Do you have concerns about not just the effectiveness of the temperature screening overall, but also the integrity of the data collected?
Well, I think I'm not an expert in this area, and so I don't want to speak on it. But I think that the whole issue of border controls is one that needs to be examined in depth. What's the best way to do that? What's the best way to monitor movements? Is it technologies like the other witness mentioned with from Mapstead? And I think we need a really holistic approach to examining what's the best way to do this.
Now, you did talk a little bit about the masks, and we're aware on the issues of airborne droplets versus airborne transmission, et cetera, and the fact that certain masks meet certain standards. So the standard mask that we see people walking around today, which is just a cloth, which may basically keeps you in, but not necessarily prevents from what's out there in those droplets. Whereas we talk about the N95, which is obviously the reason why it's the N95 is because of the percentage that it reduces, right? And we talk about even N99.9 masks that are out there. These masks that were there, should we be using them today? Should it be something, in the issue of, yes, N95s are of value in certain areas where there's a lot greater risk, but is that a value that we see in the public?
That's a really great question, because I think ultimately, and I think Dr. Osterholm at the University of Minnesota has raised this issue. He's in fact working on a plan to be able to create for the public masks that are as protective as N95s. So I think that should be our goal. I think everyone should be protected if the equipment is available to the same level as healthcare workers, because with this COVID-19. It's extremely infectious, and I think that the airborne infectious is a real risk. So I think our goal should be to protect everyone to the N95 level, and I think Dr. Osterholm's project is a great way forward in that direction.
In the CFNU press release, you're quoted as saying the SARS Commission provided clear recommendations on worker safety and infection containment, lessons that have been overlooked in this pandemic. It is our hope that this investigation prompted by the CFNU will yield unequivocal evidence-based recommendations that are urgently needed to prepare Canada and the frontline workers for the next wave of COVID-19. What are the barriers when it comes to knowledge transfer on the lessons learned from the previous pandemics and epidemics?
That's a great question. I think one of the problems is that PHAC and other public health agencies in Canada and the WHO as well don't have the kind of diverse knowledge and expertise that we need. They have very good knowledge in terms of epidemiology, but they really need to have broader knowledge on worker safety expertise and also expertise on aerosols and aerosol transmission. So for example, two of the top people on aerosol transmission in the world are Canadians, Dr. Raymond Tellier in Montreal and Dr. Lydia Baraba at MIT. They should be at the table. They should be involved, with PHAC in developing, the kinds of policies and procedures to protect our workers. And so I would recommend that, there be a real review to ensure that PHAC's expertise is expanded and really reflects the latest science. A lot of the science that the PHAC and WHO are relying on disease transmission dates back to the 1930s and 40s, when instruments were not good enough, not sensitive enough to measure aerosol transmission. The science has made incredible progress in looking at small aerosol transmission, but that expertise is not at the table at either PHAC or WHO. So I would recommend that they really expand their knowledge base. And my last point is that we should look at the CDC. The CDC has two components. One is NIOSH. NIOSH is dedicated to worker safety, and PHAC should have the same type of independent, very strong, very well-resourced, and well-staffed expertise to look at this. And we have the Canadians who can do that, and we should bring them on board.
Thank you, Dr. Kitchen. We go now to
Thank you.
Mr. Longfield. Mr. Longfield, please go ahead. 6 minutes, please.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses. Wish we had more time. That's always the struggle that we have. But I'm going to start with Medtronic and then go to Mapstead and then finish up with Mr. Postma, time permitting. Mr. Huppé, it's great to have you here. You've mentioned the ventilators for Canadians. We have a couple of Guelphites that are helping out on that project with Jim Estel from Danby and Rick Jameson from ABS Filter. I had early discussions during the pandemic with Jim Estel around the WAR approach to treating industrial problems and sharing information in order to work together on problems. One of the issues, though, that we've studied on the INDU committee, the industry committee, is intellectual property. And I wonder how you see intellectual property being managed and shared in this sector, in the health sector, as we go through the COVID crisis.
Vous êtes en... Well, thank you very much for the question, Mr. Longfield. As far as Medtronic is concerned, there's been really no challenge or concern or threat to intellectual IP. There are lots of types of various ventilators and fans, if you will. Small, large, simple. Some will evacuate a hangar in no time flat. Some are for intensive use. Very much more sophisticated. You can't pump air in or out of a lung the way you would a hangar, of course. But the technologies are very, very variable. There's a very broad range of devices, from simple to extremely complex. So we have to bear that complexity in mind. It might be erroneous to think that we can convert a production line quickly, especially if we're going from one extreme of the range to the other. However, the units we were talking about, it's a sort of in the middle range. It's complex, but it's not overly complicated. It's a technology that's fairly straightforward and known. So for that type of device, it's fairly available. We've made our model, our blueprints, as it were, public for free use. And we've seen Ventilators for Canadian take up the challenge, and they were very pleased with the results.
I came from a pneumatics background. I know when you're operating under low pressure and low flow, which is what the lungs do, that it makes for some challenges, and also fail safe to make sure that if the unit doesn't work properly, that there's ways to continue without starving the patient for air. But when we look at working with universities and academics, developing and innovating, we've had challenges in the past in Canada to transfer intellectual property without other countries buying our intellectual property and selling it back to us, so we have to manufacture under license. Are you manufacturing under license in your place, or are you working within the ideas from Canadians?
Well, if you're referring to the ventilators or fans that we made available, it was open-handedly common property. We just let it go. Ventilators for Canadians. Well, they were using the expertise from Baylis, and there was no license per se. But for the academic and research community, there's a greater cooperation now. It's more open access today. And McGill and others have taken that route, for example. So we might see a spreading of that particular phenomenon soon, I hope.
That in Germany too, at the Fraunhofer Institutes, sharing information. And thank you very much. Mr. Nagpal, the 62 patents that you mentioned always get my attention. I love ideas being patented in Canada, but then there is a time and a place where you have to operate openly. Looking at the anonymizing and aggregating data is another thing we've talked about, Mr. Nagpal. But you've talked about location-based. So are you able to still use the data? You said for a limited amount of time. Could we use the data, or could we have protections on that data so that the government of Canada could aggregate and anomalize it, or does it just fade away once it's being used one time?
Thank you, Mr. Longfield, for your question. We really, are innovative Canadian technology company, and that's why we really pride ourselves by having 62 patents in such like 6 years of kind of like our formation. And back to your question, any kind of like authentication and credentials can be done for controlling the data. First of all, the data is stored on your personal device. If you want to share that information with your local government authorities, you can do that by giving them a password. And then it also disappears automatically within 7 to 14 days, depending upon how the system is configured. So at the end of the day, we want to give the control to the Canadians so that they can make their own choices.
So that's great. Thank you. And finally,
thank you, Mr. Longfield.
Oh, that's too bad. I knew I'd run out of time. Thanks so much.
Monsieur Désolé, c'est à vous maintenant.
Mr. Désolé, you have 6 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. My first question is for Mr. Nagpal. Could you tell me what the proportion of the population is, what proportion of the population could have access to this application, including those who don't have access to a smartphone?
Question. First of all, the entire population technically can have the access to this technology. Now, one of the main reasons, or one of the main kind of like, cases is that you need to have a smartphone to enable the use of this technology. But theoretically, you can deploy this using any Google Play Store or an App Store, and can give that ability for everybody to use this technology. Now, that said, if a person doesn't have a smartphone, they can also use certain features of this technology by going through a website where they can see how the spread is happening in their own locality. And if they are seeing some symptoms, then they can go easily to that website, enter that information, and then do contact tracing. So there are various ways that we can securely provide that access to Canadians.
Okay, if I can be a bit more precise, I feel that not every single person in this country has a cell phone, and so not everyone might be able to implement this kind of program. Are we talking about 70, 80% of the population that could potentially install this application? What is the percentage?
Would depend upon how we want to deploy the technology. So let's say that 70% of the people who have the smartphone, they can easily install a smartphone application, and the rest of the people can go on a website and then access the similar features on a web browser. So the compatibility, it depends upon how we're deploying the technology. So you can deploy it on a smartphone, you can deploy it on a website or a web browser. Now, of course, there will be some situations where we won't be able to hit the prospects where they are not able to access, let's say, internet, or they're not able to access a laptop or a computer. We will not be able to cover those population. But if you're looking at like a majority of the population, we would be able to do that using this technology. And this is exactly how countries like Singapore or some European state members have done very successfully. Now, we have some customers in Taiwan, and they were saying to us that we didn't even face that type of challenge as it was faced in the rest of the world. And it's just because how the countries are using specific technologies for the well-being of their citizens.
OK, tant mieux, parce que...
Very good, because I'm afraid that this application might not be available to a small part of our population, the disadvantaged. And those people might also be more at risk. Thank you for your answer anyway. Mr. Passamy, I have a question to ask you. The current measures that have been in place for the last 3 months, are those measures adequate and are they sufficient?
Thank you for the question. And I presume that you're asking about the personal protective measures for healthcare workers. Is that correct?
Oui.
Okay.
Yes.
They're not. And I believe the data showing that 1 in 5 of the COVID-19 cases in Canada involves healthcare workers demonstrates that. I think we really urgently need to take a precautionary approach and protect our healthcare workers across the country to the highest level using airborne precautions.
Thank you, I understand. Say there is a second wave. Do you think we have enough time to adapt these measures, change these measures so that we can protect these people and they're not as infected?
We do have enough time if we act urgently. And one of the really disappointing things thus far from the federal government and PHAC is that we have not acted urgently to ensure that we had enough PPE. So for example, in late December, Alberta bought a huge quantity of N95 respirators. PHAC and Ottawa sat on their hands. Federally, we didn't begin to buy in large scale until March. And by that time, as you have heard, it was the Wild West in trying to buy N95s. So we lost that opportunity. We have to move urgently. We have to create domestic supply. And then we also have to look at alternatives because N95s are not the only way to protect healthcare workers. There are P100s, there are other types of equipment that should be looked at on an urgent basis so that we have enough equipment. For example, talking about technology, there have been some efforts to begin creating new types of equipment. We have to move quickly. Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Desiree. Thank you.
Mr. Davies, go ahead. 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Magpal, you mentioned that Singapore was one of the earliest adopters of contract tracing, and you comment on the European Union in the process of developing a model of contract tracing. We have had many experts tell this committee that testing and contact tracing are vital parts of getting a good grip on COVID-19. Where is Canada today in terms of our implementation of contact tracing?
Thank you, Mr. Davis, for the question. I believe that Canada hasn't been the front runner in terms of adopting contact tracing. In the past week, we had an announcement from the PMO office that BlackBerry and Shopify would be collaborating together to build a contact tracing app, which will be available for Canadians to be downloading anonymously and voluntarily. Now, we haven't used the technology in the way we should have, to kind of like go and take the technology as the other countries have adopted very quickly at very early stages. Right now, we don't have the app which is available, right? We don't have any data which is available to see how it can be used. And if you can't kind of like analyze it, right, you can't improve it. Right, and this is like if, let's say, somebody has COVID and he or she goes to the hospital, how can you practically find with 100% accuracy where that person went in the last week or the last 14 days? It's very difficult. And I believe that we are doing good by doing those announcements that we will be launching it, but we haven't done that at this time.
Now, experts estimate that voluntary contact tracing apps usually need approximately 60% participation among the public to be effective.
Correct.
In your view, is that level of voluntary uptake realistic, or should we be looking at mandatory use of contact tracing? What's your advice to the committee on that?
First of all, I think that's true that it needs to have a 60% of an uptake. I personally don't feel that we would get 60% uptake on contact tracing app in Canada. I don't believe that we should make it mandatory. We are not a country where we take away that right from the citizens. What I feel is that we should complement that with the other location-based technologies or other traditional methods, right? When you combine the new technology with the traditional methods and also use some other kind of like location-based applications, you are able to get that result which you're looking for. And I feel like that's a fine kind of like mixture that we need to look for, so that you can get that maximum result out of the deployment of this such technology.
Thank you. Mr. Posamai, on January 31st, you wrote to Federal Health Minister Patty Hajdu, urging her to adopt precautionary protections for healthcare workers. That letter said the following, quote, "I am profoundly disappointed that the Public Health Agency of Canada is risking health workers' safety by recommending lower protections against the novel coronavirus. Failing to act with tougher policies would be to do a grave injustice to the victims of SARS and their families. Half of SARS victims in Ontario were health workers," end quote. What was her response to your concerns?
She never replied to my letter.
Okay, thank you. Now, Mr. Postma, staying with you, we know that the final report of the Independent SARS Commission in 2006 recommended very clear prescriptions for how to deal with a future pandemic. And one of them, as you pointed out several times, is that in any future infectious disease crisis, that the precautionary principle guide the development, implementation, and monitoring of procedures, guidelines, processes, and systems. Now, we've already pointed out that when it came to masks, when it came to droplet versus airborne transmission, asymptomatic transmission, community transmission, travel restrictions or border closures, emergency stockpiles, I think it's a fair comment to say that in all of those areas, if we did anything, it was we ignored the precautionary principle and instead waited until there was actual evidence of something before we acted. Would that be a fair characterization of Canada's response from January to date?
It is. It is. We had opportunities over and over, especially in the beginning in late December, when the first inkling was happening in Wuhan that something very serious was happening. We had the opportunity to act boldly and quickly to protect our healthcare workers, and by extension, to protect the country, because protecting healthcare workers goes hand in hand with pandemic containment. And the countries that have low levels of healthcare worker infections also have the best record of containing the pandemic.
Can you help us understand why that's the case? I mean, we had an unprecedented focus after SARS, as you mentioned, the Archie Campbell Commission. I think we had one at the federal level as well. We have very clear prescriptions about what to do. Yet, in the last 14 years, from 2006 to 2020, we basically not only have fallen down in that period, but from the beginning of COVID-19, we have failed to actually implement the very prescriptions in the SARS independent SARS Commission report. Can you give us your view on why that is? How could that happen?
Well, I tell you personally, I'm gutted that it has happened, that things have gone the way they have here. This has gone far worse than my worst nightmare. And one of the reasons is that PHAC does not understand the role of unions and workers in worker safety. I mean, in any workplace, the responsibility for worker safety is joint one between workers and their employer. And that means that, especially in the healthcare sectors, nurses, doctors, other healthcare workers have a direct role in ensuring the safety of the workplace. And in the interactions that I've know of and heard of between PHAC and the unions, there's not been a positive dialogue, a collaborative dialogue between workers, unions, and PHAC. Instead, what they've done is they've done cursory consultations with workers and unions, ticking the box. When in fact, that should be an ongoing dialogue, because the frontline workers know firsthand what the risks are, how things are evolving, and can make recommendations in real time on how to ensure that everyone is protected. And by everyone, I mean workers, patients, visitors, and the rest of us, because as I said earlier, pandemic containment and worker safety go hand in hand.
Thank you, Mr. Davies.
Thank you.
We go now to the second round. We'll start our second round with Ms. Jansen. Ms. Jansen, please go ahead. 5 minutes.
Yes, thank you very much. I would like to ask my questions in the beginning here with Mr. Pasamai. I really appreciated your explanation about the lack of urgency. And I can tell you that having been on this committee now from the very beginning, I felt the very same lack of urgency coming from PHAC and from the government on a number of these things. We had very serious concerns about the messaging from Dr. Tam regarding the danger that a mask use would pose to a Canadian, and her insistence on ignoring the precautionary principle. And this messaging obviously was subsequently repeated by Minister Hadjo at many of the COVID-19 briefings. And now they have since said they have new science that made them change their recommendation. But this unfortunately meant we lost a very important window of opportunity to have Canadians get on board and comfortable with mask use. From various presentations we've had at this committee, it appears that Canadians were possibly being told not to wear a mask at the beginning due to the fact that PHAC knew our national stockpile was not maintained and there were not enough masks in Canada to protect even just our healthcare workers. Would you say that the politicization at the highest level of PHAC has affected the decisions being made to the detriment of Canadians?
Well, I think PHAC has been slow to the game, and especially public masking is a great example. Early on, I wrote a letter to Dr. Tam saying that your concerns about self-contamination are warranted, but if that's the case, you should have an urgent, wide public health campaign, as they do in Singapore, as they do in Hong Kong, as they do in Taiwan, how to wear a mask. And that still hasn't happened. I mean, as I walk in Toronto, I see well-meaning Canadians wearing homemade masks, but they wear it, with their nose exposed.
Yes.
I see Canadians with beards wearing masks when we all know that beards prevent the safe wearing of masks. So So there's a real failure there to really act urgently to protect Canadians and also to make sure that they get the best information.
So many constituents in my riding wanted to use masks in the beginning, but it was suggested that wearing a mask would in public instill fear or racist backlash. And since Dr. Tam would have known that masks were an added level of protection right from the start, why do you think she didn't insist they be used? Do you think she was pressured by the WHO or other political stakeholders?
You know, that's a great question and one that I've wondered about. You know, what I've seen is that you know, PHAC's advice has been in lockstep with the WHO right from the word go. And there's not been any critical thinking, any critical evaluation on whether that's the right advice. I'll give you another example, if I may. The WHO China mission in February of 28 this year said that China was able to eliminate healthcare worker infections, but didn't explain how. You have to go right to the back to the fine print to say that they did it because they ordered everyone to wear N95s. Now, you know, that's a grave failure by the WHO, and I hope it's one that the committee exposes if you get the right WHO witness. But you know, I'm disappointed that PHAC didn't have the critical mindset to look at that and say, why did China able to protect its healthcare workers?
I know when we had PHAC come by, we actually realized that they were not even rotating our stockpile. How do we hold these people at PHAC responsible? Like, should there be an independent body doing a performance review, as you mentioned, on a yearly basis or something?
Well, you know, when Justice Campbell gave the advice on setting up PHAC and the Dr. Tam's office, he thought that I agreed with him that we had it covered because it gave that office the independent ability to speak out on health risk. And we thought, you know, if there was a shortage of masks, they would speak out and they would do so in a timely manner. It hasn't happened. So I think Parliament, in my view, should really require certification every year in depth on whether we're ready for such an existential risk.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. I have a quick question now for Medtronic. I read that in your May company report, you had a 26% decrease in your first quarter revenue due to COVID-19. Now, apparently the cardiac and vascular group saw the steepest declines at 34%. And we know that many procedures were being deferred right now in order to ensure our healthcare system is not overwhelmed. And our following your following revenue numbers suggest that's quite a high, you know, a high rate. What would you think that will cost in Canadian health outcomes?
It's
very difficult to really plan the cost, but it seems that there is the crisis, that we have seen throughout the country for several weeks. And some cardiac surgeries were urgent, so they took place. But for the rest of it, they start slowly to resume some operation, but it's very hard to put any figure.
Many hospitals.
Thank you, Ms. Jansen. Thank you. We go now to Ms. Sidhu. Ms. Sidhu, please go ahead. 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, all witnesses, for being here with us. And really want to say thank you, Medtronic, Patrick. I had a great conversation with the Medtronic President, Neil Fraser. As you know, this is very unprecedented time. We are really facing the first time ever. And thank you very much who's doing the great work, especially Medtronic from Brampton South and helping Canadians, but not just helping Canadians around the world as well. In May, Medtronic announced an expansion of the Medtronic insurance program with a new option to support diabetes customers. As you know, Brampton has the highest rates of diabetes. How has the change assisted some of the most vulnerable customers during this pandemic? Can you elaborate on that?
Can you just repeat the last portion of your question, Ms. Sidhu, please? Thank you very much.
For diabetic patients, you were helping those in Brampton. So can you say that how you are helping there? And also, I want to ask you the second question. So 250 million of virtual care during COVID-19, the federal government has invested. And you said in your statement, the Medtronic utilized Peter Monk Hospital using 50%. In Brampton Civic Hospital, overcrowded, overwhelmed. How can Brampton Civic Hospital get benefited from your program, telehealth program? Dr. Hoppe?
Merci pour
Thank you for the question. First of all, I think that with the efforts we have, the Integrated Health Solution, it's a team that really allow us to optimize what we call care corridors and clinical care. And we can also identify core patients within health professionals. And once they have been identified and through objective criteria and according to the programs that are being set up to select the good patients with the various indications we have for our products and how we can accompany these patients. So there is a whole cohort, a team that can help to support hospitals and clinical teams throughout the country to make sure that these programs can be beneficial for the diabetic population in Canada.
Would you like to talk about you created an app to help frontline medical workers during COVID-19 pandemic. How has the app been successful in assisting frontline workers?
Je ne suis pas certain de savoir.
I'm not sure exactly to what app you're referring to, but right now we have some projects when we have optimized, the PPE material for some procedures. So with the staff that is required for some procedures, we will try to coordinate the deployment of these PPEs to make sure that they are used in the right way. So there are some simulation with algorithms that are carried out to support clinical teams. So that's available.
Thank you. And what is the Medtronic current weekly ventilator production capacity? Has Medtronic reached its production goal for June 2020?
Absolument.
Yes, absolutely. You're speaking about ventilator? That's what you're referring to?
Effectivement, oui.
Yes. We are multiplying by 5 the production. And I was saying to Mr. Longfield earlier, we are speaking about these very highly sophisticated equipment that require a lot of technology and different parts according to the procurement or supply chain. So we are right now, we are really on the right path to be able to accomplish what we had declared some weeks ago, to really have the production that we need in terms of ventilators.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, do we have more time? You're on mute. You're on mute, Mr. Chair.
Sorry, half a minute, please.
Okay, then I'll pass on.
Thank you, Mr. Du. I should advise the committee that we have a hard cap on the meeting facilities at 25 minutes after the hour. If we are extremely ruthless in the timing, we can get everybody's questions in. And so we will carry on now with Ms. Kuzi. Ms. Kuzi, please go ahead, 5 minutes.
Pardon, et merci beaucoup parce que...
Oh, sorry. Thank you very much. Yes, I'm a member of a human committee, so it works a bit differently. But my first question is for Mr. Huppé. I would like to know whether Mr. Huppé has seen any change in the supply chains worldwide, generally speaking. If there's been a change, what did you say, in the supply chains? Well, for the supply chains, maybe we were lucky, but until now, we have not met any major challenge concerning the supply chain for us. And that includes as well the medical equipment as well. Yes, great. Now, do you think that it is important for Canada requires maybe more exchanges with China? Do you think it's important to have more or less, rather, less exchanges with China? Well, I am not an expert in international politics. I just believe that what has been done until now, and according to our experience, we have been able to increase our production capacity and to also be able to fulfill the needs. We have also opened our intellectual property to some technology and also staff on the ground that help to, again, reoperate some ventilators and to help also to install some new training as well for the available staff. Well, do you think it's possible that we'll see a change in the supply chains since it is possible that there will be less trust in China to provide such equipment, generally speaking? Well, answer, I hope there will be a good planning strategy, as I was saying in my remarks, that the supply system has to be seen as a strategic element and that it should be based on the principle, based on policies that give access to solutions, not in terms of volume or technology. If we're looking for solutions, I think technology will follow and will be able to meet that demand. But we need some expertise in terms of strategy concerning supply. Yes, I think it's important to have this expertise concerning these also foreign equipment, but also to have the viewpoint of the industry, because the industry knows what we have and what we need to have. I think important to have the cooperation with the industry.
Étant donné ce que nous avons vu pendant la pandémie, qu'est-ce que nous avons appris dans le cas qu'il y a?
What would you consider the lessons that we've drawn if there's a second wave? What lessons have we drawn from this current one? What can we apply for the next one? Well, first, I agree with you completely that industry does have a role to play. Should participate more, be more engaged, as it were. Some experiments have been conducted by way of multinationals, such as ourselves. Throughout the world, we were exposed to various different styles of health regimes, health systems. And I think our industry, from here forward, will have to be seen not only as a simple supplier of product, but a full participant who can provide various other elements to the solution. Our health system must remain a public health system, and we're very proud of it. And I think it would be have another look at it. We're not just simply a provider of products. We are partners, and we should begin to engage more fully right away. Do you think that governments has done a good job of determining what our inventory and our stocks are right now? And do you think that they'll be able to foresee our needs in future? Initially, at the beginning of the...
Please go ahead.
Écoutez, je pense que le fait qu'on...
Well, I think we will be able to find solutions. I think it's quite simple right now to backslide and go back to the former so-called normal, and we mustn't do that. I'm quite pleased to see that the opportunities are there, that the will is there, and that we can in fact do some more preventative type of strategies. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Monsieur le Président, votre micro n'est...
Your mic is not on, Mr. Chairman. I think you're still in mute.
I'm in a hurry, so I forgot a step. So, Mr. Kellaway, you have 5 minutes, but if you're able to do it in 3 minutes, it would be most helpful.
I will do that, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of questions. With respect to Medtronic Canada, I understand that your organization has recently been named as a top workplace in Ontario for supporting mental health of its employees. Can you tell us a little bit about your organization, what it has done to support the mental health of employees in this pandemic? I'm big on looking at best practices, and I think sometimes the mental health side of things tends to go not as noticed as other things. So I'm wondering if you could speak to that briefly to us. Then I have one more question.
Il y a plusieurs...
Yes, well, thanks for the question, and thank you for the accolade, this recognition that we've earned in Ontario. There are various things that we do. It all stems from our mission statement. It was created by the founder, Earl Backen, over 100 years ago. And our mission, essentially, is to ensure that we can minimize pain, extend life, and put the patient first. We're very patient-based, patient-focused. We care for their well-being as well as their physical health. And we try to inculcate in our employees the same mentality, the same attitude, and that they do this every day. So when you get down, a little bit discouraged or frustrated, just remember what our mission is. And we're doing this for the patient. And we'll bring forth a few sample cases, for example, where a patient has successfully gone through some process or incident with our equipment in hand. And that's about it.
Thank you so much. One last question, Mr. Chair, and then I'll give up my time. With respect to Dr. Paisami, as a former senior advisor on the SARS Investigation Commission, and you've talked about this, but I'm wondering if you had to look at the now and in the future, which is not that far, if we look at a second wave or potential second wave, what would be a number of ways that you would recommend now that frontline healthcare workers, which I have many in my family, to maintain their safety in the pandemic?
Well, I think first of all, we need to move to the precautionary principle in protecting them. We need to go to airborne precautions, and as we now move, as the government has said, to domestic production of N95s, we should really ramp that up to make sure that we have enough supplies to do that. And we need to urgently try to find alternatives as well, because N95s are not the end-all and be-all. There are other ways, and unfortunately, PHAC doesn't have the internal worker safety expertise to really do that. And I think it's important to reach out to health safety experts in industry to advise PHAC on doing that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Kilroy. I appreciate your help. And we will go now to Mr. Desilets. It's over to you. You have 2.5 minutes strictly, and if you can make it less, that would be very helpful. Thank you.
Okay. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. My question would be addressed to Mr. Paisami. You mentioned the importance that the federal government should be able to provide an annual report so that we don't find ourselves in a situation as we are in currently, for example. More specifically, could you tell us what elements you'd like to find in that report? What should it cover? Reserves, perhaps, innovation, cost? What exactly are you looking for in a report?
Great question. So we need to know, do we have enough supplies? Do we have enough N95 respirators? Where are they located? But also, more importantly, do we have the right worker safety culture across the country in different settings? Because the N95 is only part of what makes a workplace safe. There's the hierarchy of controls, engineering control. So it's really a holistic approach to safety. And it goes beyond worker safety. It's also, do we have in place the industrial support if we need to ramp up supplies in certain areas? So it's really a holistic approach.
Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Huppé, another question. Does Quebec have as much respirators and masks that they need? That's an excellent question, and I don't know if I have an answer specifically. It's very, very difficult as a supplier because we are one among many suppliers, so we don't have access to all the numbers and all the information. And I couldn't give you a hard, fast fact number. Okay. Well, with a look forward to a potential other pandemic, and suppose it's more acute or serious than this one, do you think our shortage of material be as acute as it has been today, or do you think that something can be done? Oh, well, measures have been taken. I don't want to brag or anything, but we've quintupled our production, as I mentioned earlier to an earlier question. And it was for product that was relatively complicated with many moving parts. We've made it available to ventilators for Canadians, open access to our IP. There's other types of ventilators that can be manufactured. The quantity next time will be greater than what we have on the 13th of March last, for example. Thank you very much. That's it for me.
And we will go now to Mr. Davies. Mr. Davies, you also have 2.5 minutes, and if you can make it shorter, that would be most helpful as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Postum. Some of the things we're talking about is water under the bridge, but we're still currently in a health crisis, and we have decisions to make now. I want to put a current situation to you and get your advice. Recently, Dr. Theresa Tam advised Canadians to avoid the 3 C's. That's closed spaces with poor ventilation, crowded places with large numbers of people gathered, and close contact where you can't maintain optimal physical distancing from others. Yet on July 1st, we just heard that airlines, Air Canada and WestJet, are going to go to full cabins where obviously you can't have physical distancing. And the federal government, through Transport Canada, is thus far refusing to enforce physical distancing rules on the airlines, as is the case with many of the businesses. What would be your advice to the government on that? Should we be mandating physical distancing rules on airlines as a precautionary principle?
I think we should. I think it's very risky to do otherwise. I think we The physical distancing approach that we take anywhere should also be occurring on airlines and on planes. I don't see why they should be exempted.
Thanks. And you know, I also have been on this committee for a number of years, and from the beginning of COVID-19. And I remember back in January and February and March, there were two things going on. One is we clearly had a shortage of personal protective equipment in this country. You've spoken of the expired masks, the destruction of 2 million N95 masks, and the clear shortage. At the same time, our Chief Public Health Officer, Dr. Tam, was advising Canadians that masks would be harmful, never mind not recommend them. And as well as clearly there were a number of healthcare workers that were not getting the PPEs they needed. Do you think there was a connection between those two things? Do you think that the reason that the government was not recommending masks to the Canadian public in the early stages of this, or providing them to the to frontline healthcare workers, was because we had a national shortage?
Could I have a 10-second response, please? Or as very quickly as you can make it.
Sorry, I can't, but I think that, yeah, sorry. I can't answer that quickly.
Thank you, Mr. Davies.
Point of order, can we not ask him to give him just a few more minutes? I'm sure the cleaning people can hold.
How about 30 seconds to answer?
I think that was a go ahead, but you're
okay. So, sorry, thank you.
Sorry, 30 seconds if you can do it.
Okay. Well, I think that shortages was probably part of the thinking, and that's the wrong kind of thinking. So, for example, if you run out of a certain antibiotic, you don't say that disease has gone away. You might find an alternate type of antibiotic so you can keep treating that disease. And it's the same thing that happened here. It happened in Ontario, and there's a court case that that ONA brought up, where a government official, a medical expert rather, said that they went away from a precautionary approach because of shortages. That is just unconscionable. If you have a shortage, you find a substitute, you find another way, but you keep protecting workers. You don't lie to people about what the science says.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So that does wind up round two, and I thank everybody for participation. I thank everybody for the time, and certainly the witnesses for your time and your expertise. I apologize to the crew that has to turn around this room. We're a little bit over, and but thank you everybody for all your hard work. And with that, we are now adjourned. Thank you.